Picking your nose. This one feels gross, and yes, it is gross, but the actual biology behind it is way more interesting than people give it credit for. Snot is not just waste your body is trying to push out and get rid of. It is a filter. It is the first physical barrier between the air you breathe and the inside of your lungs. And it is loaded with antimicrobial enzymes like lysozyme that actively kill bacteria as you breathe. That sticky stuff in your nose is doing real work every single second of the day. Every time you sniff something dusty, or walk through a crowded room, or stand near someone who is sick, your snot is the first thing trapping particles, viruses, and bacteria before they have a chance to get any further in. And here is the part nobody really talks about. Limited research suggests that the bacteria and small antigens stuck in your snot actually help train your immune system through repeated low-dose exposure when they get reintroduced to the gut or the back of the throat. It is basically how the body samples the outside world and learns what to react to and what to leave alone. Kids who pick their noses tend to show stronger immune profiles in some studies, partly because they are constantly exposing themselves to a low background of microbial information. Now, obviously, do not be the guy doing this in public. Wash your hands, use a tissue when you can, but the act itself is not the horrifying health crime your mom told you it was when you were 6. It is a weirdly functional little process the body has been doing since forever. Cracking your knuckles. Your aunt was wrong. That popping sound you have been told for 30 years would give you arthritis is not damaging your joints at all. It is gas. Specifically, it is dissolved nitrogen forming a bubble in the synovial fluid that lubricates the joint, and then that bubble collapsing as the pressure changes. That is the entire mechanism. No bone is grinding, no cartilage is wearing down. There is a guy who cracked the knuckles on one hand and not the other for over 60 years just to test this, and the x-rays at the end showed no difference between the two hands. What it actually does is keep the joint capsule mobile. People who never move their fingers through full range tend to develop stiffer joints over time, and the gentle crack stretches the capsule and momentarily decompresses everything inside. It is not magic, it is not therapy, but it is also not the slow path to arthritis people keep telling you it is. The thing that actually wrecks joints is not cracking. It is sitting completely still for 40 years, never loading the joints properly, and then acting shocked when they start falling apart. Crack away. Peeing in the shower. Yes, do it. There is no health downside. The warm water keeps the area cleaner than people assume, and the steady stream of hot water washes whatever you produce straight down the drain along with the soap and shampoo. You save a full flush of clean drinking water every time, which actually adds up across a year more than you would think. But the real reason this habit is quietly good for you is something most people never even consider. The pelvic floor is the group of muscles that controls when you pee, when you do not, and how completely you empty. A surprising number of people, especially men over 40 and women who have had kids, have a chronically tense pelvic floor that never really relaxes. Sitting on a cold porcelain toilet seat is not exactly a calming experience. Standing in warm water, body heat up, muscles loose, you actually empty your bladder more completely than you do on a cold seat in a cold bathroom. More complete emptying means less leftover urine sitting around, which means lower irritation of the bladder lining, and a lower risk of urinary tract infections in the long run. So the gross out factor here is basically social. The physiology is fine. Sniffing your own armpit. This one is weirder, and most people have done it, and most people would die before admitting it. But there is a reason your brain has you doing this automatically when you are stressed, or after a workout, or when you are sitting somewhere quiet and a bit anxious. Your own scent contains real information. Your sweat composition genuinely changes with stress, illness, hormonal shifts, and immune activity. When you smell yourself, your brain is doing a quick internal check-in on what is going on inside. There is research showing that exposure to your own body smell, including your own stress sweat, can have a calming effect on the nervous system in certain contexts because it reads as completely familiar. It is one of the few smells the brain instantly recognizes as safe. People with anxiety have used worn t-shirts and old hoodies as comfort objects, partly for this exact reason. So next time you catch yourself doing it, just know that your brain is running a small diagnostic in the background. Just maybe do it somewhere private if you can help it. Biting the inside of your cheek when thinking. This one looks like a nervous tick, but it is actually a focus tool the body uses without checking with you first. The inside of your cheek is loaded with sensory nerve endings connected to the trigeminal nerve, which is one of the largest nerves in your face, and feeds directly into the brainstem. A small mechanical stimulation in there, like a gentle press from your teeth, fires off a signal that briefly bumps up alertness and concentration. You will notice people doing it when they are calculating something, working through a hard idea, or trying to remember a word that is just out of reach. It is basically the body's version of tapping a desk to stay alert in a long meeting. As long as you are not chewing through the tissue and giving yourself a permanent ulcer, this habit is doing more for your focus than most of the focus supplements people overpay for online. It is free, it is built in, and your brain has been quietly using it for years without ever telling you. And here is the part where I would normally tell you that no amount of weird little focus hacks will fix the situation if your actual food is a mess. That is exactly why both the Blandis Band cookbook and the Summer Shred program exist. Blandis Band is 102 recipes that are high in protein, lower in calories, easy to make, and actually taste like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, loaded fries, desserts, all the food people assume they have to give up the moment they try to get lean. And the Summer Shred program is a 6-week personalized program designed to get you in the best shape of your life for summer. And it comes with a free copy of Blandis Band included. Both are half price right now for launch. First link in the description. Talking to yourself out loud. People who do this in public get a weird look. People who do this in private are quietly outperforming everyone else on memory tests, decision making, and problem solving. There is real research on it. Speaking your thoughts out loud, especially when you are working through something difficult, engages a separate part of the brain than silent thinking does. It activates the auditory feedback loop, which makes the thought more concrete and easier to actually evaluate. Athletes do it. Surgeons do it. People learning new languages do it. Self-directed speech is one of the most reliable, free, no-equipment tools for improving working memory and slowing down impulsive decisions. You hear yourself reasoning, and that creates a small gap between thought and action. And most good judgment lives in that gap. So if you talk yourself through your gym sets, or talk through your grocery list at the supermarket, or narrate what you are doing while cooking, your brain is sharper for it. The weird looks from strangers are just the cost of doing business. Eating cold leftover rice or pasta straight from the fridge. This one sounds like a sad student dinner, but it is genuinely better for your blood sugar than the same food eaten hot. When you cook starchy carbs like rice, pasta, or potatoes, and then let them cool down, a portion of the starch restructures into something called resistant starch. The molecule physically changes shape and becomes much harder for your small intestine to digest. What that means in practice is two things. First, that resistant starch passes through to your large intestine, where it gets fermented by your gut bacteria into short-chain fatty acids, like butyrate, which feed the cells lining your colon and support gut barrier function. Second, because less of the starch is being absorbed as fast glucose, your blood sugar response to that meal is noticeably lower than it would have been hot. People with insulin sensitivity issues genuinely benefit from this. Eating yesterday's rice cold out of the container is not laziness. It is mild metabolic optimization you stumbled into by being too tired to reheat. Even reheating after cooling keeps some of the resistant starch intact, so leftover rice is just a better food than fresh rice in this specific way. Sleeping with one foot outside the blanket. There is a reason almost everyone instinctively does this. Your body temperature has to drop by about 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit to enter and maintain deep sleep. If your core stays too warm, your sleep gets shallower, you wake up more often, and you spend less time in the restorative stages where the body actually does its repair work. Your feet are one of the most efficient heat dumps in the entire body, because they are packed with blood vessels close to the surface called arteriovenous anastomosis, which can dilate and offload heat fast. Sticking one foot out from under the duvet is your body's way of fine-tuning its temperature without bothering to wake you up. It dumps just enough heat through the exposed foot to bring your core temperature down into the proper sleep zone. And it does this completely automatically. People who sleep in rooms that are too warm and stay fully covered tend to sleep worse and remember less of their dreams because they spend less time in REM. So that habit you have been doing your whole life is your body running a thermostat for you. Let it. Long, slow sighs when you are stressed. A real proper sigh, the kind where you take a slightly bigger breath in, then a small second breath on top of it, then a long, slow exhale all the way out, is one of the fastest known nervous system resets available to a human being. It has a name, it is called the physiological sigh, and it has actually been studied in pretty good detail in recent years. What happens mechanically is that the second small inhale re-inflates collapsed alveoli at the very tops of the lungs, and then dumps out built-up carbon dioxide on the long exhale. That carbon dioxide is the part you are actually trying to get rid of, because rising CO2 is part of what triggers the feeling of panic and tightness in your chest when you are stressed. A few of those sighs in a row pulls your nervous system out of fight or flight faster than almost any breathing technique people pay good money for in apps. You can do it in a meeting, in traffic, in the middle of an awkward conversation, and nobody around you even notices it happened. People who do this naturally throughout the day often have lower baseline anxiety, not because they are calmer by nature, but because they keep resetting themselves all day long without realizing it. Doodling in meetings. This is the one that gets you the most judgment and deserves it the least. Doodling looks like distraction. It is the exact opposite. Studies on memory retention have repeatedly shown that people who doodle during a talk, lecture, or meeting actually remember significantly more of the content than people who sit there perfectly still, trying to look attentive. The reason is that the human brain genuinely struggles to stay locked onto a single passive input for very long. Without something else to occupy a small slice of attention, your mind drifts off hard into completely unrelated thoughts, and then you realize 20 minutes later that you have no idea what was just said. Doodling occupies just enough of your motor cortex to keep your brain from wandering off completely, while leaving the language and memory parts of the brain free to absorb everything coming in. It is the same principle as people who learn better while pacing or chewing gum. So the kid in school who got told off for drawing in the margins was probably retaining way more than the kid who sat there looking attentive while secretly daydreaming about the weekend. If you have meetings, you actually have to sit through, doodle. Your boss does not know it, but you're paying better attention than they are. Fruits. Fruits are one of the few foods that almost nobody actually needs to overthink. They are nutrient-dense, full of fiber, full of water, full of vitamins, and full of antioxidants. And the fiber in fruit is the reason that the sugar inside it does not behave the way people think it does. When you eat a whole apple, the fiber slows down how fast that sugar enters your bloodstream, which means your blood glucose goes up gently instead of spiking, your liver handles it without drama, your insulin response stays reasonable, and you feel full for a decent amount of time afterwards. That is the whole point of eating fruit in its original form. Berries help with brain health and inflammation. Citrus fruits load you up with vitamin C and help your body actually absorb iron from plant foods. Bananas give you potassium and quick energy, which is why they show up in basically every pre-workout meal on Earth. Apples and pears are loaded with soluble fiber that feeds your gut bacteria. There is genuinely very little to complain about with whole fruit. The thing people get wrong is fruit juice. The moment you juice a fruit, you remove the fiber, the pulp, and most of the chewing-related satiety cues that made fruit feel like a real meal in the first place. What you are left with is sugar water with a small dose of vitamins floating in it. A glass of orange juice can easily contain the sugar of 3 or 4 oranges and almost none of the volume, none of the fiber, and none of the fullness. Your liver gets hit with a fast wave of fructose, your blood sugar spikes, you drink it in 20 seconds and feel hungry again half an hour later. And the marketing on these bottles is incredible. Made with real fruit, 100% natural, packed with vitamin C, all of that can technically be true while the drink is still behaving in your body more like a soda than like a piece of fruit. Smoothies are a slightly better case because they keep some of the fiber but only if the fruit is blended whole and not strained. A green juice from a juice bar with apple, pineapple and orange in it is closer to dessert than to a health drink. Eat the fruit, drink the water. The two were never meant to be combined into one fast-absorbing sugary liquid. Vegetables. Vegetables are the closest thing to a free pass that exists in nutrition. High volume, low calories, packed with fiber, packed with vitamins and minerals, packed with antioxidants and plant compounds that influence everything from blood pressure to gut health to inflammation. Leafy greens like spinach, kale, and arugula give you folate, vitamin K, magnesium, and a stack of antioxidants for almost no calories. Cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage contain sulforaphane and other compounds linked to reduced cancer risk and better detoxification through the liver. Root vegetables like carrots, beets, and sweet potatoes carry more carbohydrate but also more steady energy and slow-releasing fiber. Allium vegetables like onions, garlic, and leeks have antibacterial and cardiovascular benefits that have been studied for decades. The fiber in vegetables does most of the heavy lifting. It feeds your gut bacteria, regulates your blood sugar response to other foods you eat alongside it, keeps your bowel movements normal, and lowers your overall calorie density so you can eat a genuinely large meal without overshooting your needs. That is why people who eat a lot of vegetables tend to stay leaner without much effort. The volume fills them up before the calorie count catches them. The downsides are minimal. Some people get bloated when they suddenly jump from eating almost no vegetables to eating a pile of broccoli and beans in one meal. But that is an adaptation issue, not a vegetable problem. Your gut bacteria need a few weeks to catch up. People with specific conditions like IBS sometimes struggle with high FODMAP vegetables like garlic and onions. But for the general population, the more vegetables you eat, the better basically every health marker gets. Grains. Grains are where the conversation gets messier because the word grain covers everything from a bowl of steel-cut oats to a slice of white sandwich bread. And those two foods do completely different things to your body. Whole grains, the ones where the bran, germ, and endosperm are all still intact, give you slow digesting carbohydrates, fiber, B vitamins, magnesium, iron, and a steady release of energy. Oats, quinoa, brown rice, buckwheat, barley, whole wheat, farro. These foods stabilize your blood sugar, keep you full, support gut health through their fiber, and have been consistently linked to lower rates of heart disease and type 2 diabetes in long-term studies. They are not exciting, they are not magical, but they are useful, and they have always been useful. Refined grains are the problem. The moment you strip the bran and germ off a grain, you have removed most of the fiber, most of the vitamins, and most of the minerals. You are left with a starchy middle, which behaves in your body almost exactly like sugar. White bread, white rice, most pasta, most breakfast cereals, crackers, pastries, anything made with refined flour. Your blood sugar spikes faster, your insulin response is bigger, your satiety is much lower, and you end up eating more total food because the refined version did not signal fullness the way the whole version would have. That is the actual mechanism behind why so many people eating high-grain diets struggle with weight. It is not the grains themselves. It is the version of the grains. A bowl of oatmeal and a bowl of frosted cereal are technically both grain-based breakfasts, and they do not even play in the same league when it comes to what happens inside your body for the next 4 hours. Dairy. Dairy is one of those food groups that some people thrive on and some people quietly suffer through without realizing it. For the people who tolerate it well, dairy is a genuinely useful food. It is one of the best sources of calcium on earth. It contains high-quality complete protein, it has vitamin D when fortified, it carries phosphorus, potassium, and B12, and the fat in full-fat dairy actually helps you absorb the fat-soluble vitamins inside it. Greek yogurt and kefir give you live probiotic bacteria that support your gut. Cheese gives you concentrated protein and fat that keeps you full for hours. Milk has been a staple for almost every dairy-producing culture for thousands of years, for a reason. The problem is that a significant portion of the world's adult population does not produce enough lactase, the enzyme that breaks down the sugar in milk, which means dairy gives them bloating, gas, cramping, and bathroom problems they have learned to live with for years, without ever connecting the dots. Lactose intolerance is wildly underdiagnosed because people just assume their stomach is always going to feel a little weird after cereal. The other issue is that a lot of dairy products on shelves are basically dessert-wearing health branding. Flavored yogurts often contain more sugar per serving than ice cream. Milk-based coffee drinks at chains can hit 50 to 70 grams of sugar in one cup. Cream cheese spreads, dessert puddings, sweetened milks, all of it gets sold under the dairy halo, while doing none of the things plain dairy does for you. Plain Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, kefir, and unsweetened milk are useful foods. The flavored, sweetened, dessert-style dairy is a different category entirely, and your body knows the difference. And while you're thinking about all this, the truth is that most people who want to get in shape are not failing because they don't know what's good for them. They're failing because the food they're eating is boring, and they cannot stick to it. That is the entire reason Summer Shred exists. It is a 6-week personalized program built specifically for you to get in the best shape of your life for summer. And it comes with a free copy of the Bland is Banned cookbook, which is 102 high-protein recipes that actually taste like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, fries, desserts, normal food, just built so it gets you leaner without making you miserable. Both are half price right now, while the launch sale is still on. First link in the description. Meat. Meat is one of the most nutrient-dense foods you can put in your body, and also one of the most misunderstood. A serving of beef, pork, lamb, or poultry gives you a complete protein with all 9 essential amino acids, highly absorbable iron in the heme form, zinc, B12, B6, selenium, and creatine. The protein in meat is what your body uses to repair muscle, maintain hair and skin and nails, build enzymes and hormones, and support your immune system. There is no plant food that matches the bioavailability of the nutrients in meat. That is just biochemistry. Iron from beef gets absorbed at around 15 to 35%, while iron from spinach gets absorbed at around 2 to 20%, depending on what you eat it with. B12 essentially does not exist in plant foods in any meaningful amount. This is why people who go fully plant-based without careful supplementation often run into deficiencies after a year or two. The nuance is around processing. Unprocessed meat, meaning a chicken breast, a piece of steak, a pork chop, a lamb shoulder, cooked at home, is a fundamentally different food from processed meat like bacon, sausages, hot dogs, deli ham, salami, and most fast food meat. Processed meats are preserved with nitrates, nitrites, and large amounts of sodium. And the long-term studies linking meat to cancer and heart disease are mostly looking at processed meat specifically, not at a grilled steak. Cooking method matters too. Charring meat to a black crust at very high temperatures creates compounds that are not great for you in large repeated doses. That does not mean a barbecue is going to kill you. It means heavily processed meat eaten constantly is not the same as a piece of unprocessed meat eaten with vegetables a few times a week. The two get lumped together in headlines, and the two are not the same food. Fish and seafood. Fish and seafood are probably the most underrated food group on this entire list. Fatty fish, like salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring, and anchovies, are one of the only real food sources of long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA, which your body uses for brain function, eye health, cardiovascular health, and reducing systemic inflammation. The omega-3s in flax seeds and chia seeds are a shorter form that your body has to convert, and the conversion rate is something like 5 to 10% at best. So eating fish twice a week genuinely does something that almost no other food does. Lean fish like cod, haddock, tilapia, and white sea bass give you high-quality protein with very few calories, which makes them excellent for fat loss without losing muscle. Shellfish like oysters, mussels, clams, and scallops are some of the most mineral-dense foods on Earth. Oysters in particular pack absurd amounts of zinc, B12, and selenium into a few small bites. The trade-off is mercury and other contaminants in some species. Large predatory fish that live longer, like swordfish, king mackerel, shark, and some tuna, accumulate more mercury in their tissues. Over time, eating these constantly is not ideal, particularly during pregnancy. Smaller fish lower on the food chain, like sardines and anchovies, have very little mercury and are some of the cleanest and most nutritious choices you can make. The other thing worth mentioning is farmed versus wild. The difference matters less than people online make it out to, but farmed salmon does tend to have a different fatty acid profile and sometimes lower omega-3 content depending on what the fish were fed. Either is still useful. Wild is just slightly better when you can get it. Eggs. Eggs are the food that got demonized hardest by the low-fat era and have spent the last 20 years quietly being vindicated by basically every modern study on them. One egg gives you about 6 grams of complete protein, choline for brain and liver health, lutein and zeaxanthin for eye health, selenium, B12, vitamin D, and a small amount of basically every nutrient your body needs. The yolk is where most of those nutrients live, which is why throwing the yolk out and eating only the white is one of the most aggressively pointless habits in the fitness world. You are paying for the nutrients and then putting them in the bin. The cholesterol panic around eggs was based on the assumption that dietary cholesterol raised blood cholesterol in a one-to-one way, and that turned out to be largely wrong for most people. Your liver makes most of the cholesterol in your body, and when you eat more cholesterol from food, your liver makes less of it to compensate. There is a small subset of people called hyperresponders whose blood cholesterol does noticeably go up when they eat a lot of eggs. But for the general population, 2 to 3 eggs a day is not the heart attack on a plate it was made out to be in the 90s. Eggs are filling, cheap, easy to cook, and pack more usable nutrition per calorie than almost any other food in the grocery store. Legumes and beans. Legumes and beans cover lentils, chickpeas, black beans, kidney beans, pinto beans, navy beans, soybeans, peas, peanuts, and a few others. As a group, they are one of the cheapest and most nutritionally efficient foods on Earth. They give you plant protein, slow digesting carbohydrates, large amounts of fiber, folate, magnesium, iron, and potassium. The fiber in beans does serious work for your gut. It feeds the bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids, which help maintain the gut lining and keep inflammation down. The combination of protein and fiber also means beans keep you full for hours, which is why diets built around legumes tend to leave people noticeably satisfied, even on lower calorie intakes. The protein in legumes is technically incomplete, meaning most legumes are low in 1 or 2 essential amino acids. This is a non-issue if you are eating any variety of food across the day, because you don't need every amino acid in the same meal. The body manages it just fine. The actual downside is the same one as with cruciferous vegetables. The fermentable fibers can cause bloating and gas if your gut is not used to them. Soaking and cooking beans properly reduces some of the anti-nutrients, like phytic acid, that can interfere with mineral absorption, which is why traditional cuisines that built around beans always involved soaking, sprouting, or long cooking times. Canned beans are fine for convenience as long as you rinse them to drop the sodium content. Nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds are calorie dense, which scares people, but the calorie density is exactly why they are useful. They give you healthy fats, plant protein, fiber, magnesium, vitamin E, and a stack of minerals in a small physical volume. Almonds give you vitamin E and magnesium. Walnuts have plant-based omega-3Es. Brazil nuts have so much selenium that 2 or 3 of them cover your daily needs. Pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds are loaded with zinc and magnesium. Chia seeds and flax seeds give you fiber and omega-3s. The fats in nuts are mostly monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, which are the ones consistently linked to better cardiovascular health. The mistake people make with nuts is treating them like a free snack. A handful of almonds is around 160 to 200 calories, and it is extremely easy to absent-mindedly eat 4 handfuls while watching TV without registering you just ate 800 calories of almonds. That is not the nut's fault, that is a portion problem. Nut butters have the same issue, and most commercial peanut butters and almond butters add sugar, oils, and salt on top of what was already a calorie-dense food. The cleaner ones list only one ingredient on the back, the nut. The other thing worth flagging is rancidity. Nuts and seeds contain a lot of polyunsaturated fat, which goes off when exposed to heat, light, and air. If your bag of walnuts tastes bitter or sharp, the fats have oxidized, and you should not be eating them. Store them in the fridge or freezer if you don't go through them quickly. Oils and fats. Oils and fats are the food group that confuses people the most, because the messaging has flipped back and forth so many times in the last 50 years. Here is the short version. Your body needs fat. Fat is not what makes you fat. Excess calories make you fat. Fat is what your body uses to build cell membranes, produce hormones including testosterone and estrogen, absorb the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, and insulate your nerves. Without enough fat in your diet, your hormones get worse, your skin gets worse, your hair gets worse, and your absorption of certain vitamins drops off a cliff. The kind of fat matters. Olive oil, particularly extra virgin, is one of the most studied and most consistently beneficial fats on earth. Monounsaturated, antioxidant-rich, anti-inflammatory, and the foundation of basically every long lifespan dietary pattern that has ever been studied. Avocado oil is similar. Coconut oil is fine in moderation, mostly saturated fat, useful for high heat cooking. Butter and ghee are also fine in normal amounts. Animal fats from quality sources are not the dietary villain they were made out to be in the 1980s. The actual problematic fats are the heavily refined industrial seed oils, like cottonseed oil, soybean oil, corn oil, and most generic vegetable oil, especially when they have been heated repeatedly in deep fryers and reused for days. Those create oxidized compounds that are inflammatory and that your body genuinely does not handle well over time. The other category to be careful with is trans fats, which are partially hydrogenated oils used in margarines, baked goods, and processed snacks. Most countries have banned or restricted them at this point, but they still appear in some products, and they are the one type of fat that pretty much every researcher agrees is bad for you, in any amount. Fast metabolism. Some people walk around eating like a garbage disposal and never gain a pound, and the rest of us quietly resent them. If that's you, you probably have a naturally high metabolic rate, which mostly comes down to a few things. You might have more lean mass than average, you might fidget constantly without realizing it, and your body might just burn more energy keeping itself running at rest. There's a real measured thing called non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is basically all the calories you burn tapping your foot, standing up, pacing while on the phone, and generally never sitting still. Some people's bodies are wired to do way more of that automatically. The gift here is obvious. Staying lean takes less effort, but here's the part nobody tells the fast metabolism crowd. It can make you lazy with food quality because you can get away with eating absolute trash for years and the mirror won't punish you. The fat doesn't show up, the damage on the inside still does. So if this is you, the gift is the freedom, not an excuse to eat like a raccoon. Good muscle insertions. This one is pure genetic luck, and there is basically nothing you can do to earn it. Muscle insertions are where your muscles attach to the bone, and where exactly that attachment sits changes how full and complete a muscle looks. Some people have biceps that attach low, near the elbow, which means even a small bicep looks like it fills the whole arm. Other people have a gap there no matter how much they train, because their muscle just attaches higher up. Same with calves. Some people have calf muscle that runs almost all the way down to the ankle, and they look jacked from the knee down, without ever training calves once. Other people do calf raises religiously for years, and stay looking like they're standing on 2 pencils. If you've got good insertions, you got handed a head start in how trained your body looks for the same amount of actual work. It's not fair. It was never going to be fair. But knowing this should also take some pressure off, because if your calves never grow no matter what, it might genuinely not be your fault. High pain tolerance. A lot of people who are great at training endurance sports or just grinding through hard physical work have a nervous system that's a little less dramatic about discomfort. Pain tolerance has a real genetic component. There are gene variants that affect how strongly you perceive pain signals and how quickly your body produces its own natural painkillers. If you've got the favorable version, hard sets feel hard, but they don't feel like the end of the world, which means you can push closer to your actual limit before your brain slams the brakes. That's a genuine athletic advantage. It's also a bit of a trap, because the same wiring that lets you push through a brutal workout also lets you push through an injury that you really should have stopped and dealt with. So the gift comes with a warning label. Tolerating pain is useful. Ignoring pain is how people end up needing surgery. Efficiency sleep. Most people need somewhere between 7 and 9 hours. And if they don't get it, they fall apart. But there is a small group of people, and it really is small, who carry a rare gene variant that lets them function fully on around 6 hours or even less, with no measurable downside. These are actual short sleepers, not people who think they're short sleepers because they've been running on caffeine and denial for a decade. Real short sleepers wake up genuinely refreshed and stay sharp all day. If you're one of them, you've effectively been handed extra hours of life every single week, which is a ridiculous gift. But this is also the most commonly faked genetic gift on Earth, because almost everyone who says they only need 5 hours is just chronically sleep deprived and used to it. So before you claim this one, be honest. If you crash hard on weekends, or you'd sleep 10 hours given the chance, you don't have the gene. You have a problem, and while we're talking about your body quietly running on its own settings, here's something worth knowing. A lot of people assume that if they're not genetically gifted, getting in shape has to mean suffering through bland, miserable diet food. It doesn't. That's the whole reason Bland is Banned exists. It's a cookbook full of high-protein, lower-calorie meals that actually taste like real food, the kind of stuff you genuinely want to eat. So getting leaner doesn't feel like a punishment. It's half price right now, and if you want the full structure, Summer Shred is a 6-week program built to get you in the best shape of your life for summer. And it comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned, included. First link in the description. Good tendon and joint structure. Some people are just built sturdy. Their tendons attach well, their joints track cleanly, their connective tissue is naturally tougher, and they can train hard for decades without the nagging injuries that follow other people around like a bad smell. A lot of this is genetic. Things like collagen production, the natural shape of your hip and shoulder sockets, and how your ligaments are wired all influence how much your body can take. If you've got this gift, you might not even notice it, because the gift is the absence of a problem. No chronic knee pain, no shoulder that flares up every time you bench. You just train, recover, and keep going. The flip side is that people with bulletproof joints often have terrible form and get away with it for years, right up until they don't. Good structure buys you a long runway. It doesn't make you immortal. Naturally high testosterone. Within the normal healthy range, some men sit naturally higher than others. And that comes partly down to genetics affecting how their body produces and uses hormones. Higher natural testosterone, still within a normal range, tends to mean building muscle comes a bit easier, recovery is a bit faster, motivation and drive run a bit higher, and body fat is a bit easier to manage. It's a quiet advantage that shows up across the whole picture. But here's the honest part. A lot of what people blame on low genetic testosterone is actually just lifestyle wrecking their hormones. Bad sleep, carrying too much body fat, never training, chronic stress, and barely moving will all tank testosterone regardless of your genetics. So if you suspect you're on the lower end, the answer isn't to feel doomed. Most people have far more room to improve their hormonal health through basic habits than they think. The genetic gift is real, but it's a smaller slice of the pie than the internet wants you to believe. A strong appetite signal. This sounds like the opposite of a gift, but stay with me. Some people have a very accurate, very honest appetite. They feel genuinely hungry when their body actually needs food, and they feel genuinely full when they've had enough, and they naturally stop. Their hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin, send clear signals that their brain actually listens to. If that's you, congratulations, because intuitive eating actually works for you, and you can mostly trust your own body to regulate itself. A huge number of people do not have this. Their fullness signal is broken or delayed. They eat well past the point of needing it, and they're hungry again an hour later for no good reason. If your appetite is honest and well calibrated, you've been handed one of the most underrated gifts there is, because it makes staying a healthy weight feel almost automatic instead of like a daily war. Fast recovery. Two people can do the exact same workout, and one is fine the next day, while the other walks downstairs sideways for 3 days. Recovery speed has a real genetic element. It's influenced by how efficiently you repair muscle tissue, how well you manage inflammation, and how quickly your nervous system bounces back. People with fast recovery can train more often, train harder, and progress quicker, simply because they're ready to go again sooner. That compounds over years into a serious advantage. But fast recovery is also one of the most modifiable things on this whole list. Sleep, protein intake, stress levels, and how much you actually move on rest days all dramatically affect how fast you recover. So if you recover slowly, some of that is genetic, but a lot of it is just sleep and food you haven't fixed yet. Good natural posture and bone structure. Some people stand up straight without thinking about it, have naturally broad shoulders, a narrower waist, and a frame that just looks athletic before they've done anything at all. Bone structure is almost entirely genetic. Shoulder width, hip width, the length of your limbs, the size of your rib cage, none of it can be trained or changed. Someone with naturally wide clavicles and a narrow waist will look like they lift the moment they put on a small amount of muscle, because the underlying frame creates that V shape for free. Someone with a wider hip structure has to work much harder to create the same visual effect. This is one of the most unfair gifts on the list, because it's pure architecture you were handed at birth. But it's also worth remembering that frame is just the canvas. Plenty of people with average frames look incredible because they actually built something on top of it, and plenty of people with great frames waste them entirely. A resilient mind. The last one isn't physical, but it might be the most powerful gift here. Some people are genuinely more mentally resilient. By default, they handle stress better, they don't spiral as hard after a setback, they stay motivated through boring stretches, and they recover emotionally faster than other people. There's a real genetic component to traits like baseline mood, stress reactivity, and how your brain handles dopamine and motivation. If you've got a naturally steady, resilient mind, that quietly affects everything, because consistency in health and fitness is mostly a mental game, not a physical one. The person who keeps showing up beats the genetically gifted person who quits every time. But like almost everything else on this list, mental resilience is also trainable. It's not fixed. People build it through repeatedly doing hard things and surviving them. So if you weren't born with it, you can absolutely earn it, which honestly might make it the best gift of all, because it's the one nobody can keep you from getting. The smooth sausage. This is what you are aiming for. One long, soft, smooth shape that comes out without strain and looks roughly like a sausage or a banana. It means your transit time is about right, your hydration is decent, your fiber intake is in a reasonable range, and your gut is processing food at a pace that lets water get absorbed properly, without drying everything out. The color should be a medium brown. It should not require effort. You should not feel like there is unfinished business afterwards, and you should not be sitting there for 15 minutes scrolling. This is the version of poop nobody thinks about because it does not interrupt anyone's day. And that is exactly the point. When the smooth sausage is your default, your gut is quietly doing its job. The hard pebbles. This is the constipation version. Separate hard lumps that look almost like nuts or sheep droppings. The kind that take effort to pass, sometimes hurt, and leave you feeling like there is more in there even after you are done. What is happening is that stool has been sitting in your colon way longer than it should, and one of the colon's main jobs is to pull water out of waste before it leaves the body. So the longer it sits, the drier and harder it gets. The usual reasons are not eating enough fiber, not drinking enough water, ignoring the urge to go when it shows up, certain medications including some painkillers and antidepressants, and stress, which slows gut motility in a lot of people. Pebble poop a few times is no big deal. Pebble poop as your default is a quiet sign that your gut is moving too slowly. And chronic constipation does not just feel uncomfortable, it puts extra pressure on the lower bowel that contributes to hemorrhoids, anal fissures, and over time, diverticular issues. The greasy floater. A normal poop will sometimes float, and that is fine. The one to pay attention to is the one that floats, looks oily, has a greasy sheen on the water, smells worse than usual, and is harder to flush than it should be. That is a sign your body is not absorbing fat properly, which is called steatorrhea. Fat that should have been digested and absorbed in the small intestine is instead being passed straight through, which is why the stool is greasy and pale and tends to stink more than normal. The reasons for this can be anything from pancreatic enzyme insufficiency, where the pancreas is not producing enough lipase to break down dietary fat, to gallbladder issues affecting bile release, to celiac disease damaging the small intestine lining, to chronic gut inflammation. One greasy poop after a particularly fatty meal is probably nothing. Greasy poops, as a pattern, especially with weight loss, fatigue, or stomach pain, is the kind of thing you want a doctor to actually look at because something upstream is not working. The mushy one, with ragged edges. This is poop that has lost its shape, comes out as a soft pile rather than a formed stool, and has ragged, messy edges instead of clean ones. It is sitting right at the edge of diarrhea without quite being it. What this usually means is that food is moving through your gut faster than it should, so water is not being reabsorbed properly before stool leaves the body. Common reasons include eating something that did not agree with you, mild food sensitivity, a low-grade gut infection, too much caffeine that day, or a stress response, since the gut and the nervous system are heavily wired together, and a stressed system speeds everything up. Occasional mushy poop is normal life. Mushy poop multiple times a week as your normal pattern means your gut is irritated by something it is being exposed to regularly. And figuring out what that thing is, whether it is a food, a drink, a medication, or a stress pattern is the actual fix. Black and tarry. This is one of the few entries on this list that genuinely needs attention. Stool that is properly black, sticky, tarry looking, and smells unusually bad is often a sign of upper gastrointestinal bleeding, somewhere in the stomach or upper small intestine. The blood gets partially digested as it travels through the rest of the gut, which is what gives it that dark tarry appearance. Doctors call it melena. The most common causes are stomach ulcers, severe gastritis, or in some cases bleeding from esophageal issues. It can also be caused by certain medications like iron supplements or bismuth containing products like Pepto-Bismol, which is why one black poop after taking iron is not automatically a crisis. But genuine melena from bleeding is not a wait-and-see situation. If you have not taken anything that would explain it and your stool is consistently black and tarry, that is the kind of thing you stop scrolling for and get checked. And while we are on the subject of your gut sending you very clear signals that something is off, the simplest way to make most of these messages quieter is to actually feed your body properly instead of living off processed nonsense and hoping nothing breaks. That is exactly why I made both the Summer Shred program and the Bland is Banned cookbook. Summer Shred is a 6-week personalized program built specifically for you to get you in the best shape of your life for summer, so you are not just following some random generic plan and pretending it is tailored to your life. And it comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned included. The cookbook on its own is 102 recipes that are high in protein, lower in calories, easy to make, and actually taste like real food. Stuff like burgers, wraps, pizzas, loaded fries, desserts, all the food people assume they have to give up to get lean. Both Summer Shred and Bland is Banned are now available at half price, so be quick if you want them while the launch sale is still on. First, link in the description. And there is also a free meal plan in the description if you want a starting point that costs you nothing. The cracked sausage. This is a formed stool, sausage-shaped, but with visible cracks running along the surface. It is on the firmer side without being painful, and it is close to the ideal version, but not quite there. What it usually tells you is that you are slightly dehydrated, slightly low on fiber, or both. Your transit time is decent, but the stool has spent a bit too long in the colon, lost more water than it should have, and dried out around the edges. This is one of the most common stool types, and most people see it regularly without thinking much about it, which is broadly fine. If it is the version you see most days, your gut is essentially working. If you want to nudge it back to the smooth version, the move is usually just more water and a bit more fiber. Not anything dramatic. Bright red streaks, visible red blood on the stool, on the toilet paper, or in the bowl, is usually coming from somewhere low down in the digestive tract, because if it were higher up, it would have been digested and turned dark. The most common cause is hemorrhoids, which are swollen veins around the anus that get irritated during a hard bowel movement and bleed lightly. The second most common is an anal fissure, which is a small tear in the lining of the anus, usually from passing a hard stool. Both of these are extremely common and not dangerous on their own, but they are uncomfortable and they are signs that constipation or straining is happening more than it should. Bright red blood with no obvious cause, or blood that keeps appearing without a clear pattern, can occasionally point to inflammation lower in the gut, polyps, or in some cases more serious bowel issues. So the rule of thumb is straightforward. Light bleeding now and then with hard stool is usually nothing. Persistent unexplained bleeding is something to investigate, not ignore. Pencil thin. Stool that is consistently very narrow, almost ribbon-like, especially when it used to be normal thickness, can sometimes be a sign that there is something narrowing the passage in the lower colon or rectum. This could be inflammation, scarring, a polyp, or in some cases, a growth that is partially obstructing things. Stool naturally shapes itself to the space it moves through, so if it is consistently coming out thinner than it used to, the space might be smaller than it used to be. One thin poop after a weird day is nothing. Consistently pencil-thin poop as a new pattern is the kind of thing worth getting looked at, especially if it is paired with changes in bowel habits, weight loss, or anything that just feels off in the lower abdomen. The full watery flush. This is straight diarrhea, no solid pieces at all, just liquid. What is happening is your gut is moving so fast that water is not being absorbed in the colon, which is supposed to be one of its main jobs. The reasons are usually short-term and obvious. A stomach bug, food poisoning, a reaction to something you ate, antibiotics disrupting your gut flora, or in some cases a much bigger underlying issue like inflammatory bowel disease. Acute diarrhea that resolves in a day or two is unpleasant but normal. The actual danger here is dehydration and electrolyte loss, especially in young children and older adults, which is why oral rehydration salts exist. Persistent diarrhea lasting more than a few days, or repeated bouts of diarrhea, is your gut telling you something is genuinely wrong, whether that is a chronic infection, a malabsorption issue, food intolerance, or inflammation. It is not a thing to wait out indefinitely. Pale or clay-colored. Normal stool gets its brown color from bile, which is produced in the liver and stored in the gallbladder. So when stool comes out pale, light gray, or clay-colored, that often means bile is not making it into the intestines properly. The causes can include a blocked bile duct, gallbladder problems, hepatitis, or in some cases pancreatic issues that affect bile flow. Some medications can also cause pale stools, temporarily. The color itself is the signal that something in your liver, gallbladder, or bile duct system is not working the way it should. If it happens once after a specific meal, it is probably nothing. If your stool is consistently pale, especially if it is paired with yellowing of the eyes, dark urine, or upper right abdominal discomfort, that is your body telling you the bile system needs a proper look. Soft separate blobs. This is stool that comes out as several distinct soft pieces, with clearly defined edges, almost like marbles, but softer. It is not quite diarrhea, but it is not properly formed either. What it usually means is that your transit time is a bit too fast, and your fiber intake is on the low side. Without enough fiber, stool struggles to hold itself together into a single piece, so it ends up as soft separate clumps. Instead, it is not dangerous and it is not unusual, but it is a sign that your gut would do better with more soluble fiber from things like oats, vegetables, fruit, and beans. If you see this version often and you are also dealing with more wind, bloating, or irregularity, fiber is usually the first lever to pull before anything fancier. Mucus coated. A small amount of mucus in stool is completely normal because the gut lining produces mucus continuously to keep things moving and to protect itself. Mucus you notice on most poops, white or yellowish in color and clearly coating the stool, is usually a sign that your gut lining is producing extra mucus in response to irritation or inflammation. Common causes include irritable bowel syndrome, where the gut is hyperreactive to certain foods, or stress, food intolerances, low-grade infections, or in more serious cases, inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. Visible mucus on its own with no other symptoms is often nothing major. Mucus, alongside blood, cramping, weight loss, urgency, or changes in bowel habits, is the version that needs more attention. Your gut is essentially raising its hand and saying something is irritating it regularly, and the actual goal is figuring out what. Green. Green stool throws people off because it looks dramatic, but most of the time it is harmless and food-related. The usual cause is eating a lot of green vegetables like spinach, kale, or broccoli, foods with strong green dye like certain sweets or drinks, or iron supplements which can shift color toward green or black. The other common cause is fast transit time. Bile starts out green when it leaves the gallbladder and gets oxidized into brown as it moves through the gut. If stool is moving through too quickly, the bile does not have time to fully change color, so it comes out green. That is why green stool is often paired with looser, more frequent bowel movements. Occasional green poop is almost always nothing. Persistent green stool with no obvious food explanation, especially with diarrhea or stomach pain, is worth paying attention to because it suggests transit time is consistently too fast or there is an infection speeding things up. Just quickly, YouTube is telling me that over 93% of you who watch are not subscribed. So if you are enjoying the videos and want to support me, hit that subscribe button. It helps me more than you can imagine. Visceral fat. This is the dangerous one. And the reason it is dangerous is that you cannot really see it. Visceral fat sits deep inside your abdomen, wrapped around your liver, your pancreas, your intestines, all the organs that are doing the actual work of keeping you alive. It is not the soft stuff you can pinch on your belly. It is firm, packed in tight, and it pushes the belly outward in that hard rounded shape that some lean-looking people still somehow have. The reason visceral fat is metabolically miserable is that it is hormonally loud. It does not just sit there, it actively pumps out inflammatory signals and dumps free fatty acids straight into the liver. Because it sits one step upstream of it, your liver ends up buried under a constant drip of fat it has to deal with, which is part of why visceral fat is so closely tied to fatty liver, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease. You can be thin on the outside and carry a quietly catastrophic amount of it on the inside. That is the part most people miss. Skinny does not mean safe. A flat stomach with bad blood work is a more common situation than anyone wants to admit. Hip and thigh fat. This one gets a lot of unfair hate. Hip and thigh fat, sometimes called gynoid fat because it is more common in women, is actually protective. Yes, protective. People who carry their weight in the lower body, the pear shape rather than the apple shape, tend to have better cholesterol profiles, a lower risk of type 2 diabetes, and better cardiovascular outcomes than people with the same total body fat carrying it around the middle. The reason is that hip and thigh fat acts like a kind of safe storage drawer. It pulls fat out of the bloodstream and locks it away in a low-risk location, away from your organs, where it cannot really cause much trouble. People with naturally good lower body storage have a built-in metabolic metabolic advantage they did not earn. The flip side is that this fat is also extremely stubborn to lose, because the body actively wants to hold on to its safest stash, which is why so many people lose fat from their face, arms, and stomach first, and the lower body holds on like it has been told to guard the gold. Cosmetically, it is doing you a favor. Brown fat. This is the one fat that is actually working for you. Brown fat, or brown adipose tissue if you want the proper name, is built differently from regular fat. It is packed with mitochondria, which are the little energy factories inside cells, and those mitochondria are full of iron, which is why it looks brown instead of pale yellow. Its whole job is to burn calories to generate heat, not store them. Babies have a lot of it, because their tiny bodies cannot shiver effectively yet, so they need a built-in heater. Adults keep small patches, mostly around the upper back, the neck, and just above the collarbone. Cold exposure activates it, which is part of where the whole cold shower trend gets its momentum from, because in lean, people brown fat fires up when the body needs to warm itself. The actual calorie burn in adults is small though. It is not the secret weight loss tool the internet wants it to be, but it is real, and people with more active brown fat do tend to be slightly leaner overall, partly because their bodies are better at burning off small excesses instead of stashing them. White fat. This is what most people are picturing when they think of body fat in general. White fat, or white adipose tissue, is the default storage fat in the body. It makes up the majority of subcutaneous fat, the majority of visceral fat, and pretty much every fat depot that is not specifically brown or beige. It stores energy as triglycerides, releases that energy when the body needs it, and produces hormones like leptin that tell your brain how much fuel you are carrying around. In sensible amounts, white fat is doing important work: hormone signaling, temperature regulation, energy storage, organ cushioning, all of that. The problem starts when there is way too much of it, especially when it accumulates in places it really should not, like packed around organs or sitting inside the liver. Then it stops being a calm storage system and starts becoming inflammatory and disruptive. White fat is not the enemy by default. It only becomes a problem when there is so much of it that the body cannot keep its hormonal signaling clean anymore. And while we are on the subject of fat distribution, the missing piece for most people is just not eating in a way that gives their body a chance. They eat sad, bland diet food for a few days, hate every minute of it, give up, and then convince themselves there must be some hidden trick they are missing. There is not. The fix is just eating food you actually enjoy that happens to be built properly. That is exactly why I made both the Bland is Banned cookbook and the Summer Shred program. The cookbook has 102 recipes that are high in protein, lower in calories, quick to throw together, and actually taste like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, loaded fries, desserts, all the stuff people assume they have to give up the second they want to get lean. And the Summer Shred program is a 6-week personalized program built to get you in the best shape of your life for summer, with proper structure instead of you guessing your way through it. And it comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned included. Both of them are half off right now for launch, so grab them while the sale is still on. First link in the description. Subcutaneous fat. This is the fat you can grab, the squishy, jiggly, normal looking stuff sitting just under your skin and on top of your muscles. It covers most of your body in varying amounts and is the kind almost everyone is thinking about when they talk about losing weight. The good news, and this is the part people do not really hear, is that subcutaneous fat is much less metabolically dangerous than visceral fat. It is mostly doing storage work, cushioning, insulation, hormone production through leptin, and just generally being a stable energy reserve. Carrying too much of it still has consequences, because too much fat anywhere is going to come with downsides. But compared to visceral fat, it is far less inflammatory and far less destructive to your organs. The frustrating part is that it is the visible kind, so it ends up being the one people obsess over, while the dangerous deep stuff gets ignored because they cannot see it in the mirror. And spot reduction is not real, so doing 1,000 crunches is not going to peel the subcutaneous fat off your stomach specifically. It comes off the body in whatever order your genetics decide, not the order your insecurities prefer. Pericardial fat. This is the fat that wraps specifically around your heart, different from general visceral fat because it sits in direct physical contact with the heart muscle itself, separated by basically nothing. And because it is right there, the inflammatory compounds it releases do not have to travel anywhere to cause damage. They go directly into cardiac tissue. People with high pericardial fat have higher rates of atrial fibrillation, coronary artery disease, and heart failure, often independently of their overall body weight. You can have a perfectly normal BMI and still carry a problematic amount of pericardial fat, and that becomes a hidden risk factor that nobody catches unless someone is specifically looking for it on a scan. It is one of the strongest arguments for why skinny does not equal healthy. Some of the worst cardiac risk profiles are sitting quietly inside people who look completely fine on the outside, but who are slowly building up fat inside the chest, where it does the most damage with the smallest warning. Intramuscular fat. This one most people people have never even heard of. Intramuscular fat is exactly what it sounds like. Fat stored inside and between your muscle fibers. A small amount is completely normal and actually gets used as fuel during exercise. The problem is when there is too much of it, because it interferes with how muscle takes up glucose from the bloodstream, which is one of the main mechanisms behind insulin resistance. If you have ever looked at a marbled steak, you have basically seen intramuscular fat. Same idea inside your own body, just less appealing when you think about it that way. People with type 2 diabetes often have elevated intramuscular fat alongside the visible kind. Trained endurance athletes also tend to have higher intramuscular fat than the average person, but theirs is the metabolically active kind that actually gets burned during training. So, like most things in the body, the same tissue can be problematic or productive depending on whether the rest of the system is being used or just sitting there idling. Essential fat. This is the minimum amount of fat your body needs to actually function. Hormones cannot be produced properly without it. Vitamins A, D, E, and K all need fat to be absorbed. Your brain is about 60% fat by structure. Your nerves are insulated by it. Your organs are cushioned by it. None of this is optional or negotiable. For men, essential fat sits somewhere around 3 to 5% of body weight. For women, it is higher, roughly 10 to 13%, because the female reproductive system specifically depends on having enough fat to function. Below that point, things start breaking down fast. Hormones drop, menstrual cycles stop, immune function tanks, mood and sleep fall apart, and the body starts cannibalizing muscle tissue for fuel. The very lean bodybuilders you see on stage, at peak conditioning, are not in a healthy state. They are in a performance state. And most of them know it, which is exactly why nobody seriously tries to maintain stage body fat year-round. Lean is not always healthy. There is a floor underneath you, and going under it has real consequences. Beige fat. This is the in-between fat that has really only been studied properly in the last 15 years or so. Beige fat is essentially white fat that has been nudged into behaving more like brown fat. It develops inside white fat depots, mostly through exposure to cold, regular exercise, or certain hormonal signals, and it starts burning calories for heat instead of just sitting there storing them. This is part of why exercise gives you metabolic benefits beyond just the calories you burn during the actual workout. Training appears to encourage the formation of beige fat, which means a slightly more thermogenic body even at rest. Same with cold exposure, which is one of the few cases where the cold plunge crowd actually has a legitimate biological argument and not just vibes and Instagram lighting. The effect is real but small. You are not going to plunge your way into a six-pack, but it is one more reason that the body of someone who trains and moves regularly is metabolically different from the body of someone who does not, even when they weigh exactly the same on the scale. Just quickly, YouTube is telling me that over 93% of you who watch are not subscribed. So if you are enjoying the videos and want to support me, hit that subscribe button. It helps me more than you can imagine. Sleep paralysis. This is the one that genuinely makes people think their house is haunted. You wake up in the middle of the night, you can see the room, you know you are awake, and you cannot move a single muscle. Sometimes you cannot speak either. Sometimes there is a weight sitting on your chest. Sometimes you swear there is a figure in the corner of the room watching you. People have been describing this exact scene across every culture for thousands of years, which is why there are about 100 different folklore names for it. Old hag syndrome, night terrors, visits from spirits, the same experience, different villages, same neurology. What is actually happening is far less supernatural and far weirder. When you go into REM sleep, your brain paralyzes your body on purpose because that is the stage where you dream the hardest, and your brain does not want you sprinting around the bedroom acting out whatever is happening up there. The body just switches the motor signals off temporarily. The catch is that sometimes your conscious mind wakes up before that paralysis switch flips back on. So your eyes work, your brain works, your body is still locked in dream mode. The shadow figure standing by the door is your brain still half-running dream imagery on top of the real room. Genuinely terrifying in the moment, basically harmless physiologically, and very common in people who are sleep deprived or sleeping on their back. Phantom vibration syndrome. You feel your phone buzz in your pocket. You reach for it. There is no notification. Your phone has been sitting on the desk for the last hour. Around 80% of regular phone users experience this on a regular basis, and it is doing something quietly unsettling to the nervous system. What is happening is that your brain has gotten so used to scanning for the sensation of a vibration that it now manufactures phantom signals just to keep itself busy. The same neural pathways that process touch and light pressure on the leg start firing in the absence of any real input. It is essentially a learned hallucination. Your brain is so primed for the dopamine hit of a notification that it will create the feeling of one out of nothing. People who check their phones constantly experience this far more than people who do not, which is its own slightly grim insight into what excessive phone use is doing to your perceptual system. Your brain is not waiting for the phone. Your brain is now pretending the phone is buzzing because that is more interesting than nothing. Eyelash mites. You have microscopic creatures living in your eyelashes right now. Specifically, you have something called Demodex, which is a tiny mite that lives in your eyelash follicles and the oil glands around your nose, cheeks, and forehead. They are not pests. They are technically part of your normal skin flora. Almost every adult on Earth has them. By the time someone reaches their 60s, basically everyone is carrying them. They come out at night while you sleep, walk around your face for a bit, mate, and then crawl back into the follicle to lay eggs. Sweet dreams. For most people, they cause no problems whatsoever, and you would never know they were there. They feed on the dead skin cells and oil your body sheds anyway, so in a strange way, they are doing you a favor. Occasionally, if the population gets out of control, usually in older people, people with weakened immune systems, or people with rosacea, they can contribute to itchy eyelids, redness, and that crusty thing some people get along their lash line. Knowing this changes nothing about your life. You still cannot really get rid of them, and they were always going to be there. But the next time someone tells you they have a clean face, technically nobody does. Sleep jerks. You are just about to fall asleep, you are drifting off comfortably, and suddenly your entire leg kicks out like you just missed a step on a staircase. Sometimes you genuinely dream the falling moment a split second before the jerk happens. This is called a hypnic jerk, and roughly 70% of people experience it regularly. It is one of those weird universal experiences nobody really talks about until you mention it, and everyone goes, "Oh yeah, I get that all the time." The most interesting theory for why this happens is that as your muscles relax going into sleep, your brain misreads the rapid drop in muscle tension as the body actually falling. Some researchers think this is a leftover reflex from when our distant ancestors slept in trees, where suddenly going limp was a serious problem. Your brain panics, fires a quick signal to grab onto something, and your body executes that signal as a full muscle twitch. Stress, caffeine, intense exercise close to bedtime, and sleep deprivation all make these worse. Completely harmless, but they will absolutely launch you halfway out of bed at 1 in the morning, thinking the floor just disappeared underneath you. Jamais vu. Everyone has heard of déjà vu, which is when something brand new feels strangely familiar. Jamais vu is the opposite, and arguably much weirder. You look at a word you have written 1,000 times. Suddenly it looks wrong. You stare at it longer. Now it looks completely fake. You have lost the sense of recognition for something that should be totally obvious. People can experience it with faces of people they know well, the streets they grew up on, even their own reflection in a mirror. What is happening is a temporary breakdown in the brain's pattern recognition. Your brain is constantly comparing incoming information against stored memory to tell you whether something is familiar. Occasionally, the matching system glitches. Stare at any word long enough and you can actually trigger it on purpose. It is part of why writers sometimes feel like a word they wrote is misspelled, even when it is not. Briefly disorienting, completely normal, and a small reminder that your sense of recognizing the world is a process your brain is actively running every second, not some fact about reality. The familiarity you feel for your own kitchen is not coming from the kitchen, it is coming from a signal your brain attaches to it. And while we are on the subject of your body doing strange things, one of the strangest is how quickly it gives up on eating better the moment the food stops tasting good. Almost nobody quits getting in shape because they cannot do the work. They quit because at some point the meals become punishment. That is exactly why Summer Shred exists. It is a 6-week program built to get you in the best shape of your life for summer, properly structured and made for actual people who want to enjoy eating. And it comes with a free copy of the Bland is Banned cookbook. The cookbook is 102 high-protein recipes that taste like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, fries, desserts, all of it built so you can stay leaner without eating sad diet nonsense. If you just want a cookbook on its own, it is now available at half price. Both are half off for launch right now, so be quick if you want them while the sale is still on. There is also a free meal plan, link in the description if you want somewhere to start before anything else. Light-triggered sneezing. About 1 in 4 people sneeze when they walk out into bright sunlight or look up at a strong light. It runs in families, and it has a properly Victorian-sounding scientific name. Autosomal dominant compelling helio-ophthalmic outburst, which conveniently spells achoo. The reason this happens is one of the more accidentally funny pieces of human wiring. Your trigeminal nerve, which controls sneezing, runs right next to your optic nerve, which controls vision. In some people, the signals get crossed. When the optic nerve fires hard from a sudden burst of bright light, it accidentally activates the sneezing nerve along with it. Your brain interprets bright light as something it needs to sneeze at. It is essentially a wiring shortcut between two nerves that should not be talking to each other in the first place. Pilots get screened for it, because sneezing during a steep climb into bright sky is not exactly ideal, and surgeons sometimes check for it before working around the eyes. Otherwise, it is a harmless quirk that gets passed down through entire family trees, like inheriting eye color but stupider. Your second brain. Your gut has its own nervous system. Not metaphorically, Literally. There are around 500 million neurons in the lining of your digestive tract, which is more than you have in your spinal cord. It is called the enteric nervous system, and it can operate completely independently of your brain. If you severed the main nerve connection between the gut and the brain tomorrow, your digestion would still run on its own. This is also why so many emotions get felt in the stomach before anywhere else. Butterflies before a presentation, genuine nausea from anxiety, that sinking feeling when bad news lands. The gut produces about 90% of your body's serotonin and a huge portion of its other neurotransmitters. It talks to the main brain through a massive nerve called the vagus nerve, and the signal traffic actually runs more in the direction of gut to brain than the other way around. Your stomach is genuinely telling your brain how to feel a lot of the time, not just the other way around. The phrase gut feeling is not poetic. It is a neurological reality. There are two thinking systems inside you, and one of them is currently sitting in your intestines. Body hijackers. There are organisms on Earth that can get inside another living thing and change its behavior to benefit themselves. There is a parasite called Toxoplasma gondii that infects rats and rewires their brains so they become attracted to the smell of cat urine rather than afraid of it. The rats walk straight up to cats, the cats eat them, the parasite then gets to reproduce in the cat's gut. That is its entire life strategy, and it works flawlessly. Around 30 to 50% of humans worldwide carry the same parasite from contact with cat litter, undercooked meat, or contaminated soil. In most people, the immune system keeps it dormant, and nothing dramatic happens. But there is genuinely interesting research suggesting that toxoplasma infection in humans is statistically linked to subtle behavioral shifts, slightly higher risk-taking, slower reaction times, and in some studies, even higher rates of car accidents. The effect in any one person is tiny, and you cannot really feel it. But the fact that a single-celled organism can creep into your nervous system and nudge your behavior in ways you do not notice is a useful thing to know about, because it quietly disrupts the idea that you are the only thing driving the way you act. Brain self-cannibalism. Your brain literally eats parts of itself on purpose every single day. There are immune cells in the brain called microglia, and one of their main jobs is to wander around hunting for weak connections between neurons, then digesting them. This is called synaptic pruning. It is not damage, it is maintenance. Your brain has way more potential connections than it actually needs, and the only way it can function efficiently is by getting rid of the ones that are not being used. Use a skill regularly, and those connections get reinforced. Stop using something, and those connections get tagged, then physically consumed by the immune cells in your brain. This is happening particularly intensely during your teenage years, which is part of why adolescence feels like such a personality restructure. And again during deep sleep, which is part of why sleep matters so much for learning. The downside is that the process can go wrong. In Alzheimer's, microglia start eating connections that should have stayed, which is part of how memory disappears. Your brain is constantly rebuilding its own structure, and most of the time it does this beautifully. Capgras delusion. This is one of the strangest things the human brain is capable of doing to a person. Someone with Capgras delusion looks at a person they know intimately, their husband, their mother, their best friend, and becomes absolutely convinced that the person in front of them is an identical imposter. They recognize the face, they see that it looks exactly right, and yet the deepest part of their brain refuses to accept that this is really them. The person sounds the same, smells the same, knows everything they should know, and the patient still insists they have been replaced by a copy. What is happening neurologically is one of the more profound things you can learn about your own mind. Recognizing a familiar person is not one process. It is two. One pathway identifies the face visually. A second pathway, which runs through the emotional centers of the brain, attaches the feeling of familiarity to that face. In Capgras patients, usually after a brain injury or in some forms of dementia, the visual recognition still works, but the emotional recognition has been cut. They see the face, they know who it should be, and there is no warm familiarity attached to it. The brain cannot accept that disconnect, so it invents an explanation. The person must be an imposter. It is a quietly horrifying reminder that the feeling of recognizing someone you love is not just memory. It is a separate emotional signal your brain is constantly attaching to people. And when it goes missing, the person standing right in front of you simply stops feeling like themselves. Just quickly, YouTube is telling me that over 93% of you who watch are not subscribed. So if you are enjoying the videos and want to support me, hit that subscribe button. It helps me more than you can imagine. Hair and nails keep growing after you die. This one sounds creepy enough that most people just nod and accept it. It is also completely false. Once the heart stops, blood stops circulating, oxygen stops reaching tissues, and cell division stops with it. Hair and nails literally cannot grow without that supply. What actually happens after death is that the skin dehydrates and starts to shrink back. The skin around the nails retracts, the skin on the scalp and face pulls tight, and now the nails and hair look longer relative to the receding skin. The hair did not grow, the skin shrank. Same with the stubble that appears to come up on a corpse. The skin pulls back, the hair shafts that were sitting just under the surface are now slightly more exposed, and to someone looking at the face, it looks like the body has grown a tiny bit of facial hair overnight. Funeral directors have known this for decades. It just makes a better horror movie line to say the body kept growing after death. So the actual mechanism never really filtered through to the public. Humans have 5 senses. This one is so embedded that schools still teach it. Sight, smell, taste, hearing, touch. Done. Except humans actually have a lot more than that, and pretending we only have 5 leads to people not understanding how their own body works. There is proprioception, which is the sense of where your limbs are in space without having to look at them. The reason you can touch your nose with your eyes closed. There is the vestibular sense, which is your balance and orientation, run by the inner ear, the reason you know when you are upside down or spinning. There is interoception, which is awareness of internal states like hunger, thirst, heart rate, bladder fullness, breathing rate. There is thermoception, which is temperature sensing on a separate pathway from regular touch. There is nociception, which is pain detection on its own dedicated system. The actual number of human senses depends on how strictly you define a sense, but most neuroscientists put it somewhere between 9 and 21. 5 is a leftover guess from ancient Greek philosophy that somehow survived the entire history of modern science and is still printed in school textbooks today. Cracking your knuckles causes arthritis. Everyone has had a parent or grandparent yell at them for this. 1. They were wrong. The actual sound of a knuckle cracking is just gas bubbles forming or collapsing in the synovial fluid that lubricates the joint. No tissue is being damaged. No bone is being ground down. There was a doctor named Donald Unger who spent over 60 years cracking the knuckles on one hand every single day and deliberately leaving the other hand alone, just to test this claim. At the end of it, he compared both hands, no difference in arthritis rates between them. He won an IG Nobel Prize for the experiment. Bigger long-term studies have looked at habitual knuckle crackers versus people who never crack and found no increased rate of arthritis either. There may be a tiny association with slightly reduced grip strength in lifelong heavy crackers, but the arthritis thing is fiction. The popping sound is just gas. Crack away if you enjoy it. Sugar makes kids hyper. Hard to find a more universally believed claim that has been more thoroughly disproven. Sugar does not make children hyperactive. This has been tested in actual blinded studies, where parents were told their kids had been given sugar when they had actually been given a placebo, and the parents still reported their kids as being noticeably more hyperactive afterwards. The effect was entirely in the observer's head. The kids on placebo behaved exactly the same as the kids on real sugar. When children seem hyper after eating sugar, it is because they are usually also at a birthday party, surrounded by friends, games, cake, presents, parental excitement, and a stimulating environment. The sugar gets blamed because it is the most obvious target. The hyperactivity is from being a child at a party. Multiple meta-analyses going all the way back to the 1990s have confirmed there is no link between sugar consumption and short-term hyperactivity in children. The myth survives because parents want a clean villain to point at. The actual answer is that birthday parties are exciting. That is the entire mechanism. Shaving makes hair grow back thicker. This one is repeated everywhere because the regrowth genuinely does feel thicker, but the reason people assume is wrong. A hair shaft is naturally tapered, thinner and softer at the tip, and slightly thicker at the base. When you shave, you cut the hair off at the surface of the skin, which means the soft tapered tip is gone, and you are left with a blunt flat end exposed. That blunt end feels coarser when you touch it, and looks darker because it has not been weathered by sun or air yet. It is the exact same hair growing back at the exact same thickness. No biological process turns the act of shaving into a signal to the follicle to start producing thicker, denser, darker hair. Hair growth rate and thickness are determined by genetics, hormones, age, and nutrition, not by a razor. And while we are on the subject of things the average person has been told to believe without questioning, the diet industry has convinced most people that getting in shape requires eating sad, bland food for months on end. It really does not. That is exactly why I made the Bland is Banned cookbook. 102 recipes, high in protein, lower in calories, easy to make, and they actually taste like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, fries, desserts, all of that. Normal meals built to help you stay leaner without hating your life. And if you want the whole structured package, Summer Shred is a 6-week program designed to get you in the best shape of your life for summer, and it comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned included. Both are half off right now, so be quick while the launch sale is still on. First link in the description. You need 8 glasses of water a day. This number gets repeated as if it is written somewhere in a medical textbook. It is not. The 8x8 rule 8 ounces 8 times a day, has no clear scientific origin anyone has ever been able to properly track down. The closest thing it can be traced to is a 1945 US Food and Nutrition Board recommendation that adults consume about 2.5 liters of water per day. That same recommendation explicitly stated that most of this amount is already contained in prepared food. That second part got dropped completely as the message traveled, and the number became a rule. The actual water requirement varies massively based on body size, activity level, climate, diet, and how much water is already in the food you eat. Someone eating a lot of fruit, vegetables, soup, and rice is already getting a serious amount of water from food alone. The thirst mechanism is also surprisingly accurate in healthy adults. Drinking when thirsty and keeping your urine pale yellow is a far better guide than counting glasses. Drinking water way beyond thirst does not provide bonus benefits, and in extreme cases can actually be dangerous through a condition called hyponatremia, where blood sodium gets diluted to a level that can cause serious neurological problems. There is no magic in the number 8. It just sounds clean. The tongue has separate taste zones. You have probably seen the diagram. Sweet at the tip, salty and sour on the sides, bitter at the back. Every primary school taught it for decades. It is wrong, and the mistake is so old, it is almost charming. The tongue map originally came from a 1901 German paper by a scientist named Hannig that did report slight differences in taste sensitivity across regions of the tongue, but only slight. The data got significantly mistranslated and exaggerated when it was reproduced in English textbooks. And that distorted version is the one that ended up in every science class for the next century. The actual reality is that all taste buds, which are spread across the entire tongue surface, can detect all 5 basic tastes: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. There are tiny regional variations in sensitivity, but no zones. You can taste sweetness at the back of your tongue. You can taste bitterness at the tip. The diagram is just bad science that survived because it looks neat in a textbook. Photographic memory exists. The idea that some rare people can glance at a page once and recall every detail with perfect accuracy is appealing because it turns intelligence into a superpower. The problem is, the actual evidence for true photographic memory in adults is essentially non-existent. Researchers have looked for it for decades, and despite testing many people who genuinely believe they have it, nobody has ever been able to demonstrate it under properly controlled conditions. The closest related thing is eidetic memory, which shows up occasionally in children, where they can briefly hold a vivid mental image of something they just saw for a short window of time before it fades. Even that is not perfect recall, and it almost always disappears by adolescence. What people with apparently incredible memory actually have is highly trained associative recall techniques, like memory palaces and pattern systems, that let them encode and retrieve information far better than the average person. It is a skill, not a camera in the brain. The myth survives because films and TV shows keep portraying it as real, and it makes for a much better character trait than the truth, which is that the person just practiced really hard. We only use 10% of our brains. This one has fueled entire self-help industries, multiple Hollywood films, and a long stream of supplement marketing for over a century. Completely false. Brain imaging studies using fMRI and PET scans have shown over and over that across the course of a normal day, basically every region of the brain shows measurable activity. Different tasks light up different regions, but no part of the brain sits dormant waiting to be unlocked by the right supplement, the right meditation app, or the right life coach. Even during sleep, most of the brain remains active. From an energy standpoint, the idea makes no sense either. The brain consumes about 20% of the body's total energy, despite being only 2% of body weight. Evolution would not maintain that level of metabolic expense on tissue that was not being used. The myth probably came from a misquoted comment by William James about people not reaching their full potential, which got distorted at some point into a percentage claim about the brain itself. The supplement industry has never let go of it because it is the perfect setup for selling pills that promise to unlock the other 90%. Humans evolved from chimpanzees. Almost everyone gets this slightly wrong. Humans did not evolve from chimpanzees. Humans and chimpanzees share a common ancestor that lived around 6 to 7 million years ago, and from that ancestor, 2 separate lineages diverged. One eventually became modern chimpanzees. The other eventually became modern humans. Chimps have been evolving for the exact same 6 to 7 million years that humans have. They are not a frozen earlier version of us. They are a parallel branch with their own evolutionary path. This matters because the misconception leads to questions like, why are there still chimps if we evolved from them? Which is built on a false premise. We did not evolve from them. We share an ancestor with them, the same way you share a grandparent with a cousin, without being descended from your cousin. The cousin is not your ancestor. They are a relative. Chimpanzees are evolutionary cousins, not ancestors. Clubbed fingers. This one gets missed for years because it happens gradually. Clubbed fingers, or digital clubbing, is when the fingertips slowly become more rounded and bulbous and the nails start curving down over them instead of lying flat. If you look at your finger from the side, the angle where the nail meets the skin should be nice and sharp. In clubbing, that angle disappears and the whole fingertip starts looking like a little drumstick. The reason you should care is because clubbing is almost never a finger problem. It is a signal that something further down the line is not delivering enough oxygen to your tissues. Chronic lung disease, lung cancer, cyanotic heart conditions, cystic fibrosis, inflammatory bowel disease, and cirrhosis of the liver can all cause it. The body is essentially responding to long-term low oxygen by remodeling the tissue at the very ends of the vascular system, which happens to be right at your fingertips. People show these fingers to doctors thinking it is a cosmetic issue. It usually is not. It is a body-wide oxygen or circulation problem, announcing itself in the least obvious place. Food suddenly smells or tastes wrong, not the temporary "I lost my taste for a week after being sick" kind of thing. That happens and usually resolves. What is much more worth paying attention to is when familiar foods suddenly smell or taste wrong for no obvious reason. Coffee smells like petrol. Meat smells rotten when it clearly is not. Your favorite meal tastes metallic. This is called parosmia or phantosmia, and it can be caused by ordinary things like sinus infections or lingering damage after a viral illness. But it can also be an early neurological signal. Sudden or persistent changes in smell perception have been linked to Parkinson's disease years before the classic tremor shows up, because the areas of the brain that process smell are among the first to be affected. It can also indicate temporal lobe issues, tumors near the olfactory bulb, or unusual seizure activity. Most people wave it off because it feels small compared to a real symptom. That is exactly why it gets missed. The nose is a surprisingly direct window into the brain, and when it starts glitching for no reason, it is worth actually investigating. Just quickly, YouTube is telling me that over 93% of you who watch are not subscribed. So if you are enjoying the videos and want to support me, hit that subscribe button. It helps me more than you can imagine. Night sweats. Not sweating a bit because the room is warm and your duvet is too thick. Actual night sweats are when you wake up genuinely soaked through, sometimes needing to change your clothes or your sheets, and it keeps happening. That is a different category. Real night sweats are one of the classic warning symptoms oncologists ask about when screening for lymphoma. They also show up in tuberculosis, HIV, endocarditis, where the heart valves get infected, hyperthyroidism, where the metabolism is running too hot, and low blood sugar events overnight in people with diabetes. Menopause causes them too, which is well known. But the point is, a healthy body should not be flooding at 3 in the morning on a regular basis. It usually means something is being fought internally that you are unaware of, or your endocrine system is misfiring. People often assume it is stress or hormones and never mention it to anyone. It is worth mentioning. A ring around the iris. If you look at yourself in a bright mirror and see a pale gray or bluish-white ring around the colored part of your eye, that is called arcus. When it happens in people over 60, it is usually just an age-related change and not a big deal. When it shows up in someone under 40 or 50, it becomes a different conversation. In younger people, that ring is often called arcus juvenilis, and it can be a visible sign of high cholesterol, specifically the kind that runs in families, called familial hypercholesterolemia. It is basically fat depositing at the edge of the cornea, because your blood is carrying more of it than it should, and because familial hypercholesterolemia dramatically raises the risk of early heart disease. That little ring you can see in the bathroom mirror is sometimes the first visible warning that your cardiovascular system is under a lot more pressure than your age would suggest. It costs nothing to look. Most people never do. And while we are on the subject of things you did not think were connected, a huge amount of what quietly damages your body over time is not some rare disease. It is just how you eat every single day. That is why I made both the Bland is Banned cookbook and the Summer Shred program. The cookbook is 102 recipes that are high in protein, lower in calories, easy to make, and actually taste like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, fries, desserts, all the stuff people assume they have to give up when they are trying to eat better. And the Summer Shred program is a 6-week personalized program made specifically for you to get you in the best shape of your life for summer. And it comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned included. Both of them are half price right now. So if you want them, grab them while the sale is still on. First link in the description. Yellow skin bumps. Small firm yellowish bumps or patches showing up in specific places on your body are not just random skin things. If you see them on your eyelids, in the creases of your elbows or knees, on the back of your Achilles tendons, or on your hands, they are usually xanthomas, which are literally cholesterol deposits underneath the skin. Same underlying story as the ring around the iris, just in a different location. Your bloodstream is carrying more fat than it can properly handle, and the body has to store some of that that excess somewhere. Sometimes that somewhere is right under your skin. And because these bumps show up disproportionately in people with severe lipid disorders and familial cholesterol problems, they are often the outside sign of a cardiovascular situation that is a lot more advanced than the person realizes. People spend money getting them removed for cosmetic reasons without ever asking why they appeared in the first place. That question is the part that actually matters. Limbs constantly falling asleep, sitting weird for 10 minutes and getting pins and needles in your foot is normal. Having your arms or legs go numb frequently at random times, or waking up almost every night with a dead hand that takes ages to come back is not. Persistent paresthesia usually means a nerve is being either compressed or damaged somewhere along its path. Carpal tunnel and cervical disc issues are the boring explanations. The less boring ones are diabetes-related peripheral neuropathy, where high blood sugar is quietly frying the small nerves in your extremities. Vitamin B12 deficiency, which can cause permanent nerve damage if it goes on long enough, multiple sclerosis, thoracic outlet syndrome, and various circulation problems. The pattern that matters is frequency and randomness. If your body parts are switching off multiple times a week for no obvious mechanical reason, the nerves or the blood supply feeding them are not happy. Pretending it is just how you sleep is not a strategy. Losing your sense of direction. This one is scary because it usually creeps up so slowly, you can talk yourself out of noticing it. Everyone gets turned around in a new city. That is fine. What is not fine is getting genuinely lost in places you have known for decades. Forgetting which turn leads home. Standing in a familiar car park and not being sure which direction you came from. Suddenly needing GPS for a drive you have done 1,000 times. Spatial disorientation like this is one of the earliest and most underreported signs of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, because the hippocampus, which handles spatial navigation and memory, is one of the first areas to get hit. It can also be caused by vestibular problems in the inner ear, strokes affecting specific brain regions, or brain tumors. But when it appears alongside other subtle memory issues in someone middle-aged or older, it is not just getting older, it is a sign to actually get checked. People often blame themselves for being distracted or forgetful. That self-blame is a very common way to miss the real problem. Persistent hoarseness. Losing your voice for a few days after screaming at a concert or catching a cold is not what we are talking about. Hoarseness that hangs around for more than 2 or 3 weeks with no obvious reason is something the ENT world takes seriously. The voice box lives in a busy neighborhood. The nerve that controls it, the recurrent laryngeal nerve, takes a strange long path down into the chest and back up again, which means anything pressing on it along the way can change your voice. Thyroid nodules, thyroid cancer, and lung tumors near the top of the chest can all interfere with that nerve. Persistent reflux can quietly burn the vocal cords over time and change how you sound permanently. Laryngeal cancer itself is heavily linked to smoking and heavy alcohol use, and its earliest sign is often just a hoarse voice that will not go away. People clear their throat for months, hoping it settles on its own. Anything more than a few weeks is worth having someone actually look at. A disappearing mole. Everyone knows the standard mole warning signs: getting bigger, changing color, asymmetric shape, irregular border. Fewer people know that a mole that seems to be fading or vanishing on its own can also be a warning sign, sometimes an even more serious one. This is called mole regression, and while some cases are harmless, in a subset of people, it happens because the immune system has recognized abnormal cells in the mole and is attacking them. That sounds like a good thing. The problem is, in some of those cases, the abnormal cells were melanoma cells, and by the time the mole starts regressing, some of those cells may have already spread elsewhere in the body. So a mole that is quietly disappearing is not automatically a win. If a mole starts fading, developing pale patches, or partially vanishing while looking a bit odd, that is worth getting checked. People notice the mole shrinking and assume the story ended there. Sometimes it just moved to a different chapter. Lower back pain. This is the most common pain on the planet and also the most lazily diagnosed. Most people get a twinge in their lower back, blame their mattress, and move on. The actual story is usually one of 3 things. Your hip flexors are short and tight from sitting all day, which yanks on the front of your pelvis and arches your lower back into compression, even when you are just standing around. Your core is weak, which means your spine is doing all the stabilizing work that your abs and obliques should be sharing. Or your glutes have basically clocked out, which forces your lower back to take over jobs like standing up, bending, and lifting that your glutes were designed for. Most chronic lower back pain is not a back problem. It is a hip problem, a core problem, or a glute problem that the back is paying for. The pain you feel is the spine waving a flag about a muscle imbalance further up or down the chain. The exception is when the pain is sharp, shoots down a leg, or comes with numbness, which is a different conversation we will get to. But standard nagging lower back pain is almost always a postural and movement debt that has finally come due. Burning electric pain. This one is your nervous system, not your muscles. If pain feels hot, tingly, or like a wire is being lit up rather than a muscle being squeezed, that means a nerve is being compressed, irritated, or damaged somewhere along its path. Sciatica is the famous example, but it shows up in tons of less obvious places. Pins and needles down the arm from sleeping on it wrong. Burning across the top of the foot when your shoes are too tight. That weird zapping feeling in the elbow when you smack your funny bone, which is actually your ulnar nerve being temporarily abused. Real, persistent burning pain that is not from an actual burn usually means a nerve is being squashed by tight muscle, swollen tissue, a herniated disc, or in chronic cases, poor blood sugar control, low B12, or alcohol damage causing peripheral neuropathy. Nerves communicate in electrical signals, so when they are angry, they speak in electrical language. Muscles ache, nerves zap. The character of the pain is the first clue about which system is actually upset. Stomach pain that gets worse between meals. There is a very specific kind of stomach pain that lives in the upper middle of your belly, just under the ribs, and it shows up when you have not eaten for a few hours. Then you eat something, and weirdly, it gets better for a bit, then comes back later. That pattern is one of the more textbook signs of a peptic ulcer or significant gastritis. Your stomach lining produces acid all day, and when food is in there, that acid has something to work on. When the stomach is empty, the acid keeps coming, but now it is just sitting on the lining itself, which, if the lining is damaged or inflamed, hurts. Stress alone does not cause ulcers, despite the old story. The real culprits are usually a bacteria called H. pylori, heavy use of anti-inflammatory painkillers like ibuprofen, smoking, and high alcohol intake. The pain often wakes people up at night because that is the longest gap between meals. If your stomach pain follows that pattern, it is not just a sensitive stomach. It is the lining of your stomach telling you it is being attacked by something it cannot defend itself against. Referred pain. This is the pain that lies about its location. The nerve wiring in your body is messy. Some organs share spinal nerve pathways with skin and muscles, which means your brain sometimes gets a signal from one place and assumes it came from somewhere else. The classic examples are everywhere. Heart attacks famously refer pain to the left arm, jaw, neck, or upper back, not just the chest itself, especially in women. Gallbladder problems often show up as pain in the right shoulder blade. Kidney issues frequently present as deep aching in the lower back that does not change with movement. Spleen damage can refer pain to the left shoulder. Appendicitis often starts as vague pain around the belly button before migrating to the lower right side. The reason this matters is people dismiss the pain because the location does not seem important. A sore shoulder blade is not scary, but if the pain does not respond to stretching, pressure, or movement, and there is no obvious reason it should be there, the body might be telling you something has gone wrong. In an internal organ, not in the muscle you are blaming. Tension headache. This is the most common headache type by a long way, and it is almost never a head problem. It is a neck and shoulder problem your skull happens to be attached to. The muscles at the base of the skull, the upper traps, and the small muscles around the jaw can pull on the connective tissue that wraps around the head, creating a band-like squeezing pressure that feels like your head is in a vice. Triggers are usually some mix of dehydration, missed meals dropping blood sugar, poor sleep, eye strain from screens, and sustained tension from sitting hunched over for hours. The pain itself is dull, on both sides, and tends to build through the day rather than hit you suddenly. It is your body telling you that something upstream of your head has been compromised for too long. Drinking water, eating actual food, getting up to move every hour, and unclenching your jaw will resolve more headaches than any painkiller. Most people skip all that and reach for the ibuprofen, which then introduces its own problem if used too often, because chronic painkiller use can actually start triggering rebound headaches of its own. Aching joint pain. Joints are designed to glide smoothly inside a capsule of fluid surrounded by cartilage that absorbs impact. When a joint aches, especially in the morning, and especially when it warms up after some movement, that is usually inflammation in or around the joint capsule. Causes range from very normal to slightly more serious. Overuse from training too much without recovery. Cartilage wear from years of bad movement patterns or impact sport. Autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, where the immune system mistakenly attacks the joint lining, or low-grade chronic inflammation from a diet packed with processed food, alcohol, and not enough omega-3s. The interesting tell with joint pain is the timing. Pain that is worst in the morning and improves with movement is more likely inflammatory. Pain that gets worse the more you use the joint is more likely mechanical wear. Both are signals worth listening to before they turn into something permanent, because joints are one of the few tissues in the body that do not regenerate well. once they are damaged. And speaking of giving your body what it actually needs to stop sending you these signals in the first place, my Summer Shred program is open right now. It is a 6-week personalized program built to get you in the best shape of your life for summer, and you get a free copy of the Blindest Band cookbook included. The cookbook is 102 high-protein, lower-calorie recipes that taste like real food: burgers, wraps, pizzas, fries, all of that, not the sad diet food most people give up on after a week. If you just want the cookbook on its own, it is half price right now. There is also a free meal plan you can grab to get started straight away. All of it is in the first link in the description. Chest pain. This is the one that genuinely deserves your attention, because the consequences of getting it wrong are higher than any other entry on this list. Not all chest pain is a heart attack, but the cost of missing one is too high to play guessing games. The classic cardiac chest pain feels like pressure, a heaviness, or something sitting on the chest, not a sharp stabbing sensation. It often radiates to the left arm, jaw, or back, comes with shortness of breath, cold sweats, nausea, or sudden exhaustion, and gets worse with exertion. That is a hospital, not a Google search. On the other hand, chest pain that is sharp, very localized, gets worse when you press on a specific spot, or worse when you twist or breathe deeply, is far more likely to be costochondritis, which is just inflammation of the cartilage between your ribs and breastbone. Burning chest pain that comes after meals and worsens lying down is usually acid reflux climbing up the esophagus. The body is generally good at giving different characters to different problems if you actually pay attention to what the pain feels like, not just where it is. Migraine. A migraine is not just a bad headache. It is a neurological event. The brain undergoes changes in blood flow and chemical signaling that produce the classic symptoms: pounding, throbbing pain, usually on one side of the head; nausea, sensitivity to light, sound, and sometimes smell; visual disturbances like flashing lights or blind spots in some people before the pain even starts. The triggers are personal but follow common themes: hormonal shifts in women around their cycle; stress letdown, which is why migraines famously hit on weekends after a high-stress week; sleep changes in either direction, sleeping too little or too much; certain foods, particularly aged cheese, red wine, cured meats, and anything with a heavy hit of artificial sweeteners or MSG in sensitive people. Dehydration. A migraine is your brain telling you it is overstimulated, undernourished, or stuck in a chemical cycle it cannot break out of. Painkillers help in the moment, but tracking and avoiding triggers is the actual long-term move, because once a migraine cycle gets going, it is much harder to shut down than it would have been to avoid. Muscle soreness, 1 to 2 days after training. This is the pain almost everyone misreads. You train hard, feel fine that night, then wake up the next day or the day after, walking like a robot. That delayed muscle soreness is not lactic acid, which gets flushed out within an hour of finishing your workout. It is micro tears in the muscle fibers from being challenged beyond their current capacity, and the soreness is the inflammation involved in repairing and rebuilding them stronger. It is not damage you should be scared of, it is the exact process that builds muscle. The catch is, when the soreness is extreme, lasts more than 3 or 4 days, and is paired with dark urine and feeling unwell, which can be a sign of rhabdomyolysis, where so much muscle has broken down that the kidneys are struggling to process the debris. That is rare, and usually only happens after an unhinged amount of training. Out of nowhere, normal soreness from a good workout is your body being honest about what it is rebuilding. Pain that does not behave like normal soreness is a separate flag entirely. Sharp, sudden, stabbing pain. This kind of pain has a job, and that job is to make you stop moving immediately. Sudden sharp pain is the body's alarm system for acute tissue damage, and it is designed to be louder and faster than any other pain signal. Sharp pain in a joint during training usually means a ligament, tendon, or piece of cartilage has just been pushed past its limit. Sharp pain in the abdomen, especially on the lower right side, can be appendicitis. Sharp pain in the lower back that radiates down the leg is often a disc issue. The defining feature of useful sharp pain is that it tells you something has just happened, right now, in a specific place. Dull, slow-building pain is the body negotiating. Sharp, sudden pain is the body screaming. And ignoring that one rarely ends well. The rule is simple. If a movement causes sharp pain, stop doing that movement. Do not try to push through it, stretch through it, or wait it out, because the body did not give you the alarm system. As a polite suggestion. Sciatica. Sciatica is technically not a condition, it is a symptom. It describes pain that runs down the back of one leg, sometimes all the way to the foot, often with tingling or numbness mixed in. The sciatic nerve is the longest nerve in the body, running from the lower back, through the buttock, down the back of the thigh and lower leg. Anything that compresses or irritates it along that path can produce sciatica-style pain. The most common causes are a herniated disc in the lower spine, pressing on the nerve root, a tight piriformis muscle in the buttock, squeezing the nerve as it passes underneath, or general spinal degeneration creating less room for the nerve to exit cleanly. Sitting for hours makes it worse because that position compresses the lower back and the buttock at the same time. Sciatica is the nerve telling you it is being pinched somewhere along a path that runs from your spine to your toes, and figuring out where the pinch is happening usually requires actual assessment, not guessing your way through random YouTube stretches. Heel pain that is worst in the first few steps of the morning. This specific pattern is one of the most recognizable in all of foot medicine. You step out of bed, put weight on your foot, and a sharp stabbing pain hits the heel. After walking around for a few minutes, it eases off, then comes back later in the day, after standing for a while. That is plantar fasciitis. The plantar fascia is a thick band of tissue running along the bottom of the foot, connecting the heel to the toes, and it gets overloaded from sudden increases in walking or running, bad shoes, tight calves pulling on the heel, or just standing on hard floors all day. Overnight, the fascia tightens up, and that first morning step is essentially stretching an angry, inflamed tissue from a stiff starting position. Calf stretching, rolling the bottom of the foot on a frozen water bottle, and not just powering through it in flat, unsupportive shoes, is what actually fixes it. Most people ignore it for months, until it becomes one of those injuries that hangs around for a year because they kept pretending it would just go away on its own. Just quickly, YouTube is telling me that over 93% of you who watch are not subscribed. So if you are enjoying the videos and want to support me, hit that subscribe button. It helps me more than you can imagine. Tip of the tongue moments. You know exactly what the word is. You can almost taste it. You know how many syllables it has. Maybe the first letter. Maybe even what film you heard it in. But the actual word itself? Gone. Hiding somewhere behind a curtain in your brain like it is playing a game. This is called the tip of the tongue phenomenon, and despite happening to basically everyone alive, nobody really knows what is going on. The leading theory is that your brain stores the meaning of a word and the sound of a word in slightly different places, and sometimes the connection between them just glitches. You have successfully retrieved the concept, but the audio file is buffering. The really weird part is that trying harder usually makes it worse. The word comes back the moment you stop trying, often hours later when you are brushing your teeth or driving home. Why your brain insists on delivering the answer at the most useless possible moment is still anyone's guess. It happens more as you get older, more when you are tired, more under stress, and zero scientists can give you a clean explanation for why this one specific malfunction even exists. Contagious yawning. Someone yawns. You see them yawn. Now you are yawning too, and you were not even tired. You might be yawning right now just because I said the word a few times. This is one of those things everyone experiences, and nobody can fully explain. The empathy theory is the most popular one. The idea that contagious yawning is a kind of social mirroring linked to how strongly you bond with the people around you. Studies have found you are more likely to catch a yawn from a close friend or family member than from a stranger, which fits that theory neatly. But then dogs catch yawns from humans, chimps catch them from each other, and even some fish do something yawn-like in groups, which complicates the whole empathy thing pretty quickly. Other researchers think it might be a primitive group syncing mechanism, a way for early humans to coordinate alertness and sleep patterns within a tribe. The honest answer is that nobody knows. We just know it spreads weirdly fast, and you almost certainly yawn during this section without meaning to. Side stitches while running. That sharp stab right under your ribs that shows up about 10 minutes into a run. For no reason. You are not doing anything different. You hydrated. And yet here it is. This little knife jabbing you in the side, like your body has filed a personal complaint. Side stitches are one of those things that have been studied for decades and still do not have a confirmed cause. The old theory was that it was a diaphragm cramp from blood being diverted away during exercise. Then it became something about ligaments in the abdomen getting tugged by repetitive movement. Then it became about irritation of the lining around the abdominal organs. Newer theories suggest it might be a posture issue, since people with worse running form seem to get them more often. None of these explanations fully hold up. Some runners get them constantly, some never get them at all, and the same person can run identical distances on different days with completely different results. For something this common, it is genuinely embarrassing how little we understand about why it happens. Synesthesia. Some people see numbers in color. Some people taste words. Some people experience music as physical shapes floating in front of them, with each chord having its own texture and weight. This is synesthesia, where the senses cross-wire in ways that should not be possible, and roughly 4% of the population has some form of it. Brain scans confirm that synesthetes really are perceiving these things, not imagining them or making them up. The letter A genuinely looks red to them. The number 7 genuinely tastes like burnt toast. What science cannot explain is why this happens. why some people have it and most do not, and why it tends to run in families but does not follow normal genetic inheritance patterns. The leading guess is that the brain does not fully prune the connections between sensory regions during early development, so signals that should stay in one lane keep crossing into others. But that is still a guess. Synesthesia exists, it is consistent within a person across their whole life, and it gives the rest of us a quiet hint that everyone is experiencing reality slightly differently than we assume. And while we are on the topic of things your body does that are a bit mysterious, getting in shape really should not be one of them. Most people make it 10 times harder than it needs to be by eating boring diet food they hate, until they give up and binge a week later. That is exactly why I made Summer Shred. It is a 6-week program designed to get you in the best shape of your life for summer, properly structured, properly personalized, none of those random generic PDFs floating around the internet. It also comes with a free copy of my Bland is Banned cookbook, which is 102 recipes that are high in protein, lower in calories, easy to make, and actually taste like real food. Burgers, wraps, pizzas, fries, desserts, all of it. If you only want the cookbook on its own, it is available at half price right now too. Both are half off for launch. So if you want them, be quick. First link in the description. The placebo effect. Give someone a sugar pill, tell them it is a strong painkiller, and a significant percentage of people will actually feel less pain. Not pretend to feel less pain, actually less pain. Their brain releases real endorphins, their nervous system genuinely shifts, and in some cases the physiological response is measurable. On scans, this is the placebo effect, and it is one of the strangest, most consistent phenomena in medicine. What makes it really weird is that it still works to some degree even when people are told the pill is fake. Open-label placebos, where the patient knows full well there is no active ingredient, have still been shown to reduce symptoms in conditions ranging from chronic pain to depression to irritable bowel. Nobody can fully explain that. The current best guess is that the brain is constantly running predictions about what your body should be feeling, and when belief, ritual, or expectation get involved, those predictions quietly adjust the actual signals being processed, which would mean that a real chunk of how you experience your body is being written by your own assumptions in real time. That is unsettling when you sit with it for too long, and it is also why drug trials have to fight so hard to prove their medication is doing more than the patient's own brain. Just quickly, YouTube is telling me that over 93% of you who watch are not subscribed. So if you are enjoying the videos and want to support me, hit that subscribe button. It helps me more than you can imagine. ASMR brain tingles, that weird fizzy feeling that runs from the back of your scalp down your neck when someone whispers, or taps softly, or carefully folds paper close to a microphone. About a third of people get it, the rest think it is complete nonsense. And brain scans show that the people who do experience it are having genuine activity light up in regions linked to social bonding, reward, and the calming branch of the nervous system. Despite ASMR being one of the largest niches on the entire internet, science basically only started taking it seriously in the last decade. The current theory is that it might be a vestigial response from grooming behavior, the same kind of close, gentle, attentive contact that bonds primates to each other when they pick through each other's hair. The whispering, the closeness, the slow, careful movements, all of it triggers something in the brain that says you are safe, you are being cared for, switch off. Why some people have it and others get absolutely nothing from the same videos is still completely unknown. It is a feeling that millions of people use to fall asleep every night, and we still cannot tell you what it actually is. Why tickling breaks your brain? You cannot tickle yourself. Try it right now. Run your fingers along your own ribs. Nothing. Same exact sensation, same exact location, but the moment somebody else does it, your nervous system loses its mind, and you are convulsing on the sofa. This is one of those tiny mysteries that hides behind something nobody really questions because it has always just been this way. The leading theory is that the cerebellum predicts your own movements with such precision that it cancels out the sensation before it even reaches your conscious brain. Anything you do to yourself, the brain knows is coming, so it dampens the response. Anything from outside breaks that prediction and the signal arrives raw. But that does not explain why tickling produces laughter rather than just being unpleasant. People being tickled often describe it as awful, almost panic-inducing, while simultaneously laughing uncontrollably. The laughter does not actually seem to be enjoyment. It looks more like some kind of distress signal that got tangled up with the same neural pathway as humor. There are theories that tickling might have evolved as a primitive defense simulation, training reflexes against attack, but nobody has confirmed any of it. We just know it happens, it can only be triggered by another person, and the brain reacts to it in a way that makes no obvious sense. Music chills. A song hits a certain note, a certain chord change, a certain build, and your skin reacts before your brain has even caught up. Goosebumps run down your arms, a wave moves up your spine, and for a second you feel something that does not really have a proper name. This is called frisson, and roughly half the population gets it. The other half listens to the same songs and feels nothing at all. Brain scans of people experiencing music chills show dopamine being released in the same reward circuits activated by food, sex, and addictive drugs. Which is wild for something as abstract as a sequence of sounds. Music does not have a survival purpose. It is not food. It is not safety. It is not reproduction. There is no obvious biological reason your nervous system should react this strongly to it. And yet it does. Reliably, across cultures, across genres. Why some people are highly susceptible to it and others are not seems to be partly about brain structure, with frisson-prone people having stronger connections between auditory regions and emotional regions. But the deeper question, why humans evolved to feel anything at all from organized noise, is something science is still nowhere near answering. Your body is responding to art like it is a threat, or a meal, and nobody can fully tell you why. Tension headache. This is the one almost everyone gets, and it is so common that people barely consider it a real headache anymore. It is the one that feels like a band tightening around your head, both sides, dull and steady, sometimes with the back of your neck and shoulders feeling like cement. Tension headaches are not coming from inside your brain. They are coming from the muscles in your scalp, jaw, neck, and upper shoulders staying contracted for too long. That contraction usually traces back to stress, bad posture, hours of looking down at a screen, jaw clenching, or just generally holding your body like you are bracing for a punch at all times. The annoying part is most people treat it as a pain to silence rather than a signal to fix. They reach for painkillers, get on with the day, and recreate the exact same situation tomorrow. The headache keeps coming back because the muscles never actually got to switch off. Real fixes are unglamorous. Hydrate properly. Stop hunching over your phone for hours. Stretch your traps and neck. Unclench your jaw, which you are probably doing right now. Get more sleep. Manage stress. It is not a clever solution. It is just the boring one that actually works. Cluster headache. This one earns its nickname, which is suicide headache, because the pain is genuinely on another planet. Cluster headaches almost always hit one side of the head, usually behind or around one eye, and they come on fast, peaking in around 10 minutes. The eye on that side goes red and watery, the nostril runs or blocks, the eyelid might droop, and the person cannot sit still through it. People with cluster headaches do not lie in a dark room like migraine sufferers. They pace, rock, and sometimes bang things because the agitation is its own symptom. The brutal part is in the name. They come in clusters. You might get 1 to several attacks per day, for weeks or months, then nothing for a long stretch. Then it comes back. The exact cause is not fully nailed down, but research keeps pointing to the hypothalamus, the part of the brain that runs your body clock, which explains why these headaches often hit at the same time every day and frequently wake people up at night. Triggers include alcohol during a cluster period, big changes in sleep, and certain altitude or barometric shifts. This, one, is not a tough it out situation. If you are getting headaches that are genuinely incapacitating and one-sided, this is the category doctors are checking for. And there are real treatments for it now, including high-flow oxygen, which can stop an attack in minutes. Dehydration headache. This one is sneaky because most people are slightly dehydrated most of the time, and they have no idea. When your fluid volume drops, your brain tissue temporarily contracts slightly inside the skull and pulls on the membranes lining the inside, which is what gets perceived as pain. Your blood becomes more concentrated, your cerebral blood vessels react, and you get this dull, all-over worse, when you move headache that feels like your skull is too tight for what is inside it. The catch is, it is often not just water. Your body needs sodium and other electrolytes for fluid balance to actually work. Chugging plain water after sweating heavily or after a long night drinking can sometimes make the headache stick around, because you are diluting your electrolytes instead of replacing them. Most dehydration headaches resolve within 30 to 60 minutes of getting actual hydration on board. Water plus a pinch of salt or some electrolytes, with a small amount of food. If your headache lifts that quickly, once you drink properly, you basically just diagnosed yourself. Migraine. People throw the word migraine around like it just means a bad headache. It does not. A real migraine is a neurological event, not just intense pain. It usually hits one side of the head, throbs with your heartbeat, and comes with this whole package of effects: light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, nausea, sometimes vomiting, and a need to lie still in a dark, quiet room because every sensory input feels turned up to maximum. Some people get aura before the pain, which is a sort of warning event in the brain that shows up as visual zigzags, blind spots, tingling in the face or hand, or strange speech difficulty for a short period before the headache itself kicks in. The mechanism involves a wave of altered electrical activity moving across the surface of the brain, changes in blood vessel behavior, and the activation of the trigeminal nerve, which is the big sensory nerve of the face. Triggers vary so much from person to person that it is basically a fingerprint. For some people, it is red wine. For others, aged cheese, hormonal swings, missed meals, poor sleep, weather changes, bright lights, or stress let down after a busy week. Some people only get a few migraines a year. Others get them every week. The newer migraine-specific medications are genuinely changing things, but the foundation is still tracking your own triggers honestly and protecting your sleep, your meals, and your stress load before the next attack lines up. Caffeine withdrawal headache. This is the headache of people who drink coffee every single morning and then accidentally sleep in, skip their cup, or try to quit cold turkey. Caffeine works partly by blocking adenosine receptors in the brain, which is why it makes you feel more alert. When you take it regularly, your brain compensates by making more adenosine receptors. The moment caffeine is missing, all those extra receptors suddenly have nothing blocking them. Adenosine floods in, blood vessels dilate, and you get this thick, heavy, often pulsing headache, usually paired with fatigue and a mood that ranges from grumpy to outright furious. The fix in the short term is obvious. Drink caffeine, the headache will lift within 30 to 60 minutes. The longer game, if you actually want to reduce your caffeine intake, is to step it down gradually instead of cutting overnight. Half a cup less every few days, or swapping some of your cups for decaf or weaker tea, lets your brain quietly remove the extra receptors without throwing a tantrum. If you keep cycling between heavy caffeine all week and zero caffeine on weekends, you're basically scheduling a headache every Saturday, which a lot of people do without ever realizing that is what is happening. And honestly, a lot of these headache patterns trace right back to the same boring stuff people refuse to fix. Sleep is rubbish, food is rubbish, hydration is rubbish, body composition is drifting the wrong way, and then everyone is shocked their head hurts 5 days a week. That is exactly why I built both the Bland is Banned cookbook and the Summer Shred program. The cookbook is 102 recipes that are high in protein, lower in calories, easy to make, and they actually taste like real food you would want to eat. Stuff like burgers, wraps, loaded fries, pizzas, desserts, all of it. None of the sad diet food people try once and quit. And the Summer Shred program is a 6-week personalized program made exactly for you and designed to get you in the best shape of your life for summer. So you're not just following some generic PDF and pretending it is built for your life. It also comes with a free copy of Bland is Banned included. The cookbook on its own is now half price, and Summer Shred is also half off for launch right now. So if you want them, be quick and grab them while the sale is still on. First link in the description. Sinus headache. This is the most overdiagnosed headache on earth, mostly because the symptoms overlap with migraine, and people self-diagnose based on the fact that their face hurts. A real sinus headache is caused by an actual sinus infection or significant sinus blockage, with mucus or pressure building up in the air-filled cavities in your skull. The pain sits across the cheeks, forehead, and around the bridge of the nose, and it usually worsens when you bend forward. It tends to come with thick colored mucus, a blocked nose, sometimes fever, and the feeling that your face is full of cement. The misleading part is that migraines very often cause facial pressure, watery eyes, and a stuffy nose too, which is why people who have been calling their headaches sinus headaches for years sometimes turn out to have been having migraines the whole time. The treatment for actual sinus issues is what you would expect: decongestants, steam saline rinses, and if it is a proper bacterial infection that is not resolving, sometimes antibiotics. If you regularly get sinus headaches without ever actually having a snotty cold to go with them, there is a decent chance you do not have a sinus problem at all. You probably have migraines that are dressing up convincingly. Hangover headache. This one combines several different attacks on your head at once, which is why it feels so disproportionately awful for what was meant to be a fun night. Alcohol dehydrates you because it suppresses the hormone that tells your kidneys to hold on to water, so you spend half the night urinating out more fluid than you took in. It also expands blood vessels, including the ones around the brain, which is part of why a hangover headache often throbs. On top of that, when your liver breaks down alcohol, it produces acetaldehyde, a compound far more toxic than alcohol itself, and your body has to work through that before things calm down. Then there is the sleep angle. Alcohol seems like it knocks you out, but it actually wrecks the structure of your sleep, suppressing REM and giving you fragmented, low-quality rest. You wake up tired, dehydrated, mildly inflamed, with low blood sugar and a head that feels like someone is squeezing it. The only real treatment is time, food, hydration with electrolytes, and not stacking it with painkillers that hammer your liver while it is already busy. The prevention is also not a mystery. Drink less, or drink with proper food and water alongside it, or accept the headache as the receipt. Cervicogenic headache. This is the headache that is actually coming from your neck, not your head. The nerves at the top of your spine share pathways with the nerves that supply pain to your face and skull. So problems in your upper cervical region get felt as pain in your head. Cervicogenic headaches are usually one-sided, start at the base of the skull, and travel forward toward the temple or behind the eye. The giveaway is that certain neck positions make it worse, and pressing into specific spots on the neck reproduces the pain almost on demand. The cause is usually some combination of forward head posture, from phone and computer use, sleeping in a way that wrecks your neck, an old whiplash injury, or arthritic changes in the upper cervical joints. Painkillers help a little, but do not really fix it, because the source of the pain is mechanical. What actually moves the needle is sorting out posture, strengthening the deep neck flexors, stretching the muscles that have shortened from being held forward all day, and in stubborn cases, physio or manual therapy on the upper neck joints. If your headaches consistently start at the back of your head and crawl forward, this category is worth investigating before you assume it is something else. Medication overuse. Headache. This one is properly cruel. It is the headache caused by treating headaches. If you take painkillers more than about 2 or 3 days a week for an extended period, especially the over-the-counter combination ones with caffeine in them, your brain starts to adapt to them. When the medication wears off, you get a rebound headache, so you take more, which gives short relief, which leads to another rebound. After a while, you are in a loop where you are taking painkillers most days of the week and getting daily low-grade headaches that never fully resolve. The diagnosis itself is depressing, because the only real fix is to stop the painkillers, which means going through a withdrawal period where the headache often gets worse before it gets better. Most people who break out of this report that within 2 to 6 weeks of stopping their daily medication, their headaches become both less frequent and less severe than they were even before they started self-medicating. It is one of the clearest examples of how a treatment can quietly become the disease. And it tends to happen to the kind of person who is just trying to function and never thought twice about how often they were reaching for the pill bottle. Exertion headache. This is the headache that shows up during or right after heavy effort, lifting something heavy, sprinting, intense sex, even straining on the toilet for too long. The trigger is a sudden spike in pressure inside the skull, combined with changes in blood flow during exertion. It hits both sides, throbs, and can last anywhere from a few minutes to a day. Most exertion headaches are benign and tend to happen in people who are already prone to migraines, especially in hot weather at altitude, or when they are dehydrated. The catch is that a first-time severe headache during exertion is one of the situations doctors take seriously, because rare but dangerous things like a brain aneurysm, bleeding can present that way. If you regularly get a mild ache after heavy lifting or hard cardio that fades on its own with rest and fluid, it is most likely benign and not something to spiral about. If you ever get a sudden blinding worst headache of your life during exertion, that is not the moment to wait and see. Hypnic headache. This is one a lot of people have never heard of. It is sometimes called alarm clock headache because it wakes the person up from sleep at almost exactly the same time every night, usually between 1 and 3 in the morning. It tends to show up in people over 50, sits as a dull or moderate pain on both sides, and lasts somewhere between 15 minutes and a few hours before fading. Then it happens again the next night, often the same time, like clockwork. It is not yet fully understood, but it seems tied to the same brain region that regulates the sleep-wake cycle, which is why the timing is so consistent. The usual headache medications do not always help, but interestingly, a small cup of caffeine before bed actually helps a lot of people with this one, which is the exact opposite of what you would expect. If you are over 40 getting reliably woken up by a headache at the same time most nights, and sleep apnea has already been ruled out, this is the category worth bringing up with your doctor, rather than just buying a stronger painkiller and hoping it goes away. Thunderclap headache. This is the one that does not belong in this video the way the others do. Every other headache on this list, you can think about, manage at home, and learn to handle. A thunderclap headache is a medical emergency. It is defined as a headache that reaches maximum severity within 60 seconds, often described by survivors as being hit on the back of the head with a baseball bat. There is no slow build, no warning, no time to think. It is just suddenly the worst headache of your life. Just quickly, YouTube is telling me that over 93% of you who watch are not subscribed. So if you are enjoying the videos and want to support me, hit that subscribe button. It helps me more than you can imagine.